A farm boy whom nobody likes one day accidentally runs into a rebellion led by a necromancer of the legacy profession. At the critical moment, he unexpectedly steals the necromancer's powers instead, obtaining a second profession and gaining the ability to cultivate the undead. From that moment on, he begins his rise from the bottom all the way to the peak of life. In Fangwan City, the class awakening ceremony was about to begin. A young man stepped down from a carriage, thanking Uncle Jiang before watching him drive off. Looking around, he thought that, just as expected from the annual awakening test, the place was incredibly lively. Within the barrier, humans underwent their profession awakening test the moment they reached adulthood. The professions varied greatly, as did their rarity levels, ranging from N rank, R rank, SR rank, and SSR rank, all the way up to UR rank. The rarer the class, the stronger the combat power, and anyone who awakened a powerful class could gain direct entry into a top academy. All around him, young people who had come for their awakening were praying to legacy class holders for blessings, hoping for a better outcome than usual. Someone nearby was pleading for the great master berserker to bless him with an S-rank class. Another person urged the line to hurry up since it was almost his turn, while someone else was sincerely asking the great heavenly maiden, whose story she had admired since childhood, to bless her so she could become a noble legacy class holder. A different guy scoffed, commenting that some people were just daydreaming in broad daylight. Hearing all this made the carriage boy curious, so he asked a nearby teen what the fuss was about. The teen explained the rumors. A new legacy class holder was supposed to appear in this year's test. Since there were still 4 vacant legacy class slots, everyone was naturally praying as hard as they could. The carriage boy began to think that if everyone was this eager to improve this year, business should be good for him. Just then, a signal sounded, and it was announced that the test was starting. Results were read out one after another. Lin with an R-rank class at level 10 and 13 mana points, Shaw with an N-rank class at level 8 and 8 mana points, and G5 with an F-rank class at level 34 and 55 mana points. When G5 was admitted, someone nearby remarked in envy that G5 actually had 55 mana points, wishing they had that much. Seizing the moment, the young man from the carriage took something out and casually asked the envious guy if he would like a tomato that could increase his mana. A tomato that increased mana instantly caught everyone's attention. He explained that he was a spirit plant doctor, and that this was a superior variety he had carefully cultivated. Each tomato, he claimed, could increase a person's mana by 5% for 5 minutes, priced at only 5 gold coins each. He also mentioned he had hunger sweet potatoes that could keep a person full for an entire day, slimming cucumbers that burned fat, and power potatoes that increased attack power by 10%. The others looked doubtful, hoping it wasn't some kind of scam, but he reiterated that his produce could increase mana and even help with weight loss. Since they were all sick of eating energy bars every single day, they eventually decided that trying something new wouldn't hurt. He announced that it was first come, first served, and once the limited stock was sold out, that would be it. The first customer could even get a free sample. The guy who stepped up first was only half convinced, examining the tomato skeptically. But after taking a bite, he felt an instant surge of energy. He exclaimed that his mana had really increased, and that his body suddenly felt lighter. Someone else rushed over, wondering if he was seeing things. He recognized the vegetables as spirit crops developed by the Extraordinary Academy's Agri-Institute, supposedly supplied only to S-rank students. The boy explained that this was a special event for the testing assembly, and that everyone here had the potential to become students of the academy in the future. The man immediately asked to have all the stock wrapped up for him. The others were not pleased, arguing that they had been there first. Now that they had witnessed the effects firsthand, they all wanted to buy. The boy thought to himself that although he only had a farmer-type class, ever since reaching max level, the vegetables and fruits he grew somehow gained beneficial buffs. He admitted inwardly that he had used a few marketing tricks, but the effects of his produce were the real deal. Later, in front of a certain shop, another man appeared while the boy was packing his things. The man listed off the items he had brought: chestnuts and pumpkin seeds for 5 gold, flour and rhinoceros dung for 7 gold, and sugar for making wine for 10 gold, along with mana and energy potions totaling 257 gold coins. The boy handed him 10 gold coins for his trouble. He then mentioned that he still didn't have enough money to buy high-grade fertilizer to improve the fields. The man thanked Brother Linfong and asked why he didn't simply grow more spirit plants if they were so useful. Linfong replied that it wasn't as simple as it looked. The man commented that it was a pity someone as talented as Linfong had ended up like this. Linfong told the man to hurry home since Auntie Xiao was waiting for him. After watching him leave, he couldn't help thinking that despite being called a genius since childhood, he had only awakened an N-rank farmer class. He joked inwardly that when he went to burn JS paper for his arch-druid father, the man might just jump out of his coffin in rage. Maybe it really was a case of opposites canceling each other out. A herbalist mother and an archdu father somehow produced a farmer. Still, when he thought about it carefully, he felt pretty satisfied with his peaceful life. He didn't have to go to the battlefield and lose his life like his father, and he wouldn't make his mother worry. Even if it was only for her sake, he had to manage their family farm properly. As he continued walking, he suddenly wondered why it felt like rain on a clear day. Before he could react, someone came crashing down right in front of him. Linfong froze, wondering if the city wall had collapsed or if the demon clan had broken in. A moment later, the fallen man shakily got back up and announced that the legacy class holder, Necromancer Haizong, had defected and intended to hand over his class legacy to the demon clan. Someone nearby shouted that they needed to report this immediately. But before anything else could happen, a huge clock materialized behind the man. Linfong stared, completely stunned, wondering what on earth was happening and whether handing a class legacy to the demon clan was even possible. A surge of energy suddenly swept across the entire area. A voice snapped at him, calling him an idiot for not running and asking if he was eager to die. The speaker said that if he hadn't been injured by forbidden magic, he would have escaped the city long ago, and that once he handed his class legacy to the demon clan, he would gain an immortal body. He added that since he had stalled for this long, the academy had probably already noticed. Linfong quietly tried to sneak away, thinking that he had clearly walked right into some kind of murder scene and should leave before the man realized he was there. But he was too slow. The man caught sight of him and demanded to know who said he was allowed to leave. He mentioned that the person earlier had been Dean Yu of the Extraordinary Academy and called it a pitiful death, then suggested using Linfong's blood and bones as a sacrifice in his memory. Linfong realized he couldn't break free at all. The terrifying man had him completely trapped. He tried to calm down and think, desperately searching for anything he could use to drive the guy away. Linfong suddenly noticed a derived skill under his maxed-out farm tool mastery, something called farm tool summoning. While taking out his tool, he warned that sacrifices were something a person should handle themselves, otherwise they'd end up in the 18th level of hell. The man was stunned. He couldn't believe a mere farmer class had managed to injure him. Linfong muttered that this was it. In the next moment, a powerful burst of energy erupted from his body, sending the enemy flying. But the surrounding energy didn't settle. It kept surging higher and higher. The enemy cursed, recognizing it as the marking formation of a demon array dancer. Since things had come to this, he decided to take over Linfong's body and escape. His entire soul suddenly plunged straight into Linfong. Inside, the voice commented that although the farmer class was the lowest rank, Linfong's innate talent wasn't bad, and he should consider himself lucky to become its vessel. Linfong replied that he had trained diligently every single day since childhood, and if the demon wanted his body, he would have to earn it. The demon dismissed him with a scoff, sneering that a low rank would always be a low rank and that its power was something Linfong could never hope to reach. Linfong figured that luck clearly wasn't on his side this time, so they might as well go out together. He prepared to strike himself with the tool, causing the voice in his head to panic and demand to know what he was doing. Linfong insisted that even if they both perished, he wouldn't hand over his body. He only hoped that if he died, he wouldn't have to listen to his father's complaints in the afterlife. But before he could act, a surge of energy erupted from his heart. The demon was shocked by the dazzling light, wondering if the kid's mana was detonating. The power continued to rise, sending the demon into a panic, shrieking that this was impossible. The entity became bound, surrounded by countless restraints, before everything was swallowed in a massive explosion. A notification chimed, announcing that Linfong had obtained a new talent, the Legacy Class Necromancer. Linfong regained consciousness in shock. He was still alive, and he could still control his body. The demon hadn't succeeded. He then realized he could manipulate the same aura the demon had used. Checking the notification window, he saw that his class had mutated into Spirit Farmstead Master, Unique Level 1. His stats were listed clearly: Strength, 300 constitution, 300 agility, 100 mana, 10 spirit, 100 luck, 300. His skill list was now packed: appraisal, reclamation, undead affinity, passive, efficient planting, overgrowth, beginner, rapid harvest, undead summoning, beginner, increased yield, soul siphon, passive, and farm tool mastery at max level. Linfeng noticed that while his level had reset to 1, all the stats from his max level farmer class were still intact. He realized his mana had increased because of that bastard soul power, which meant that when he leveled up again, his stats could break past a normal farmer's limits. There was also that new skill, undead summoning. He wondered if he could actually summon the undead, praying he wouldn't end up summoning that guy again. He experimented by channeling magic through both hands, trying different combinations. The farmer's mana and the necromancer's mana began to fuse. Closing his eyes, he thought through the possibilities. His class tree hadn't changed, he hadn't lost the farmer class. Instead, he had gained another one, Necromancer. The person who entered his body had truly been a legendary legacy class holder, which made him question whether the man was actually dead. He could feel that this power wasn't fully his yet. If he failed to tame it and convert it completely, not only would his farmer class collapse, but his consciousness would eventually be devoured again. He muttered that the disgusting yellow glow really did look the part. He attempted a summoning. A magic circle appeared, and from it emerged you, the undead sage, level 1, and he, the undead wild hunt, level 1. Linfeng realized it was truly them. Even though their levels had been reset, they still retained their battle instincts and could level up again. Suddenly, he sensed the enforcement team approaching and knew he had to leave immediately. No one would believe that an ordinary farmer had killed 2 extraordinary individuals. If his current situation was exposed, it could lead to fatal consequences. His top priority was to find a place with shelter, resources, and hidden land where he could experiment with this dangerous new power and turn his father's theories into reality. One day later, at Linfeng's farmland, he noted that an entire day had passed, and the necromancer's influence on his class still hadn't faded. A TV broadcast played in the background, announcing the birthday of an old astronomy teacher. While using magic on the crops, Linfeng observed that everything catalyzed by his new power had started turning strange. The more they grew, the stranger and scarier they became. The crops had mutated so drastically that they were even snatching birds straight out of the sky. Linfeng couldn't believe what he was seeing. If anyone else witnessed this, they would assume the demon clan had invaded. He decided he needed to get rid of it immediately, realizing the new mana had caused the ordinary crop to undergo a terrifying mutation. However, if he could control this power and guide it properly, he might be able to cultivate the unique varieties his father had always envisioned, but never succeeded in creating. The kind of high-value crops that could strengthen a person's class. On the TV, the news anchor interrupted the broadcast with an urgent wanted notice. The legacy class holder, Necromancer Hisha, had launched a rebellion the previous day and murdered Dean Yui. His crimes were described as heinous. Anyone providing information would be rewarded, while anyone sheltering him would be treated as an accomplice. Linfeng realized he had to be extremely careful. The necromancer's undead power absolutely couldn't be revealed. He needed to think of a name for his undead followers to avoid suspicion. Suddenly, he came up with the idea of calling them farmhands. His class panel listed him as a spirit farmstead master, so having a few helpers was perfectly normal. The news continued, stating that to deal with the increasing pressure from the demon clan, the Extraordinary Academy was expanding enrollment. All candidates who passed the examination would gain preferential access to academy resources and be granted a private manor for cultivating high-tier crops, along with special subsidies. Enrolled students could also hire farmers to grow high-recovery crops for them. Linfeng thought that the academy's land was safe, fertile, and resource-rich, exactly what he needed right now. He had to get in. The necromancer identity was a time bomb, but a spirit farmstead master was just a farmer in everyone else's eyes. At the Extraordinary Academy, Registration Plaza, Linfeng waited in line with the others. When asked for his name, age, awakened class, and level, he introduced himself clearly. Linfeng, 18 years old. Class, Spirit Farmstead Master, Level 1. The examiner checked Linfeng's information on the paper and muttered that he had never heard of a Spirit Farmstead Master before. Assuming it was just another non-combat class trying to sneak through, he told Linfeng to release his class aura. Lin Fong did as instructed. After sensing it, the examiner clicked his tongue. Just the useless aura of a farmer class. He called for the next person and told Lin Fong not to waste his time. The people waiting nearby burst into laughter. Someone mocked him for making up such a ridiculous class name, adding that a level 1 farmer trash actually dared to register. Another person told him to hurry back to his fields. The student in front even tried flattering the instructor, saying he wouldn't hire someone like Lin Fong to farm for him, and that he shouldn't drag down the school's strength. Lin Fong insisted that his class was a mutated type, and asked the instructor to give him a chance, stating his fundamentals were solid. The instructor scoffed. What kind of fundamentals could a level 1 piece of trash possibly have? He ordered security to throw him out. Before they could touch him, Lin Fong quickly held up the admission brochure. He pointed out that it clearly stated all class users were allowed to take the exam, warning that he would report them if necessary. He even threatened to contact the Supervision Bureau, stating there was a teacher preventing him from taking the academy exam. The instructor immediately stopped, shouting at him for daring to make such threats and promising he would make Lin Fong suffer the consequences. He declared that there was no way a level 1 farmer could pass the test anyway. Some of the people in line whispered that the instructor was going too far, even if Lin Fong had a farmer class. Turning him away was one thing, but humiliating him like this was unnecessary. Someone mentioned that the instructor had failed his own promotion and had been sent to the admissions office, which might explain his foul mood. The instructor then yelled that anyone who didn't want to take the exam could get lost. Later, Lin Fong was moved to another testing area where the instructor sneered at the group, telling them it wasn't too late to admit defeat and kowtow in thanks for being allowed to leave. Lin Fong thought the process was too slow. He summoned his followers and instructed them that waiting for the rabbits to wander into the traps would take forever. He ordered them to quietly eliminate the demon-horned rabbits roaming nearby without letting anyone else notice. The summoned beings rushed into the surrounding forest and carried out his orders with precision. They wiped out so many rabbits that it was hard to believe. Even Lin Fong was stunned. He realized that the 2 summons were unbelievably strong even at level 1, and felt as if he had struck gold. Soon after, the bell rang, and the instructor announced that time was up. All candidates were ordered to step forward and hand over the rabbit horns they had collected. The first student stepped up with only 2 horns and was immediately declared a failure. Another came with 3 and was also marked as failed. When someone arrived empty-handed, the instructor called him useless trash and told him to get as far away as possible. Whispers rippled through the crowd. There were usually plenty of rabbits, so why had they been so hard to find this time? One student managed to bring 4 horns, which the instructor considered decent, noting that some didn't get a single one and would have to wait for the next enrollment expansion. Eventually, Lin Fong and the instructor came face to face. The instructor mocked him, demanding to see his haul and betting he didn't have a single horn. In response, Lin Fong unloaded a collection so massive he practically needed a teleportation circle just to bring it all out. The pile was overwhelming. The instructor was left staring with his mouth wide open, and even the student behind him couldn't hide his shock. The instructor counted a total of 500 demon-horned rabbit horns. Lin Fong calmly repeated that the total was 500 and asked if he would like to count them again. Flustered, the instructor accused him of cheating. At that moment, the director arrived and cut him off, scolding him for making things difficult for a child and demanding to know who had taught him such behavior. The instructor panicked at the sight of the director, nervously asking why he was there. The director quipped that if he hadn't come, all his pet rabbits would have been wiped out by someone with no professional ethics. He then turned to Lin Fong and informed him that he had passed the preliminary exam. Lin Fong immediately bowed, thanking the director for his fairness. The director remarked that Lin Fong felt strangely familiar, which made Lin Fong uneasy. He worried that he had already been exposed, the last thing he needed after making it this far. Suddenly, the director asked, "What is your relationship with Professor Lindsay?" Lin Fong fell silent for a moment, relieved that the director didn't seem to have noticed anything unusual about his class. He replied, "Linnea was my father. Did you know him?" The director immediately brightened. "You're the son of an old friend." Judging from the situation, he asked if Lin Fong was planning to enroll in the academy. He wondered if he was facing any difficulties and offered to open a back door for him if needed. Before he could say anything else, a female director walked over and reminded him that everyone was watching. The man suddenly noticed the gazes around him and tried to play it off, claiming he had only been speaking casually. He told Lin Fong that his uncle had urgent matters to handle first, but once Lin Fong enrolled, he would personally show him around the academy. Lin Fong couldn't shake the feeling that the teaching director seemed incredibly unreliable. The female director then addressed the students, telling those who passed the preliminary exam to follow her. She encouraged the ones who failed not to be discouraged, reminding them there would always be a next time. Meanwhile, at the Extraordinary Academy Sunwheel Branch investigation room, an analyst presented a theory. He noted that Dean Yu-Yi and Heisha had disappeared at the same time. He believed that Dean Yu-Yi must have discovered He-Hao's secret and was caught during the investigation, leading to both of them taking each other down. He insisted that a third party must have stolen He-Hao's legacy talent, and concluded that as long as they found the person who obtained the undead talent, they would uncover the truth. Another staff member sighed. "We understand your eagerness to prove yourself, but please stop making such brainless speculations." Tuka complained that none of them believed him, promising that he would find evidence sooner or later. Some staff members wondered if they should stop him, pointing out that he was backed by the Duke, and getting involved might be inappropriate. Someone else responded that it was better to let him go, since the Sunwheel Academy was meant for cultivating elites, not for allowing people to shove their way in just for status. Just then, the director entered and announced that orders had come from above. Once He-Shao is found, eliminate him on sight. One person asked, "What if He-Shao is already dead?" The reply was grim. He might have changed his appearance. Anyone using necromancer skills is to be eliminated without hesitation. Back at the Extraordinary Academy re-examination mission hall, the female director announced the requirements for the next stage. All students were to clear the level 5 special dungeon outside the city, the Demon Horn Beast Lair, within a 3-hour time limit. The students immediately started panicking. A level 5 dungeon was already pushing it when most of them were only level 4 or 5. Grinding down the final boss might barely be possible, but completing it within 3 hours sounded realistic only for the elite. She clarified the rules. You aren't expected to clear it alone. You are allowed to form teams with a maximum size of 5 people. After forming a party, report back to register and start the timer. The hall instantly descended into chaos. Students shouted, looking for groups. Someone needed 2 more players and wanted a strong front-row warrior. Another claimed to be an elemental mage with explosive damage looking for a team. One kid even called out that he was just a little boy and asked if any big brothers would carry him. Meanwhile, Lin Fong was occupied with his status window when someone approached. He looked up to see a girl introducing herself as a level 7 magic-type class user. She said she had seen his preliminary exam results and believed anyone who could kill that many demon-horned rabbits must be extremely strong. She politely asked if she could team up with him. Lin Fong thought that a level 7 player was definitely strong enough to solo the dungeon. If he were still just a farmer, he would have gladly accepted the offer. However, his necromancer abilities absolutely couldn't be exposed, so he chose to decline. "I prefer to act alone," he told her. She smiled, wished him a successful clear, and walked away. Lin Fong then went to the instructor, who questioned why he didn't have a team and reminded him that the dungeon's difficulty shouldn't be underestimated. Lin Fong simply asked to be issued the mission. The instructor handed it over and asked if he was aiming for the solo clear reward, the Black Bear Gale, which was an enormous boost for low-level players. He warned him, "Don't overestimate yourself." Lin Fong thanked him for the reminder. Soon after, Lin Fong stood outside the entrance of the demon-horned beast lair, alongside the other students and instructors. The instructor looked at him again. "Where are your teammates?" "I am entering alone," Lin Fong stated. The instructor laughed and told him that a level 5 dungeon was far too dangerous for a single person, suggesting he return after finding teammates. Lin Fong reminded him that the rules allowed for solo entry. Another instructor guessed that he was probably aiming for the solo clear reward. Someone else commented that he had guts, but questioned whether he actually had the strength to back it up. In the end, they simply wished him good luck. Lin Fong stepped into the demon-horned beast lair. Inside, the environment was completely chaotic. Monsters with long, whipping tongues were everywhere. Lin Fong noted that level 3 and level 4 monsters posed no threat to him anymore. With his summons at level 6, they could take those creatures down effortlessly. He sent energy through his body and observed that his health remained stable, although the guide mentioned there would be many monsters. The sheer number he encountered was far beyond expectations. Still, he decided it was the perfect chance to test his new summoning method. From the shadows of the cave, countless eyes watched him. He activated undead summoning. This time, the undead that appeared were the very lizard-type monsters that had attacked him earlier with their long tongues. He ordered his minions to charge, and they immediately rushed forward, tearing through the surrounding creatures. Lin Fong observed that monster-form undead retained certain traits from their pre-death state. They were extremely aggressive but had low intelligence, capable of following only simple commands. However, they also consumed less mana. He wondered if they could handle chores like carrying water when they weren't fighting, as that would be convenient. He then sent his stronger summons into the fray. Once they entered the battlefield, any monster that dared appear before them was instantly wiped out. While clearing the dungeon, Lin Fong was already brainstorming other uses for his summons. He noted that the humanoid undead possessed higher intelligence, could utilize their pre-death skills, and were far more flexible in combat. In the future, he planned to have them handle menial tasks like weeding and fertilizing the fields. As more monsters fell, a notification chimed, announcing that he had reached level 7. Lin Fong realized that only half an hour had passed, yet he was already standing before the boss room. Deep inside the dungeon, he found the boss, a massive demonic bear bound in chains, roaring furiously. Lin Fong considered it the perfect opportunity to test his overall combat strength, and unleashed all his units at once. He instructed Hatchet to pin the boss from the front, ordered another unit to weaken it with curses, and had the rest harass its weak points. His summons executed the commands smoothly, and he noticed their coordination was improving. He continuously restored his mana, as maintaining control over such powerful summons drained a large amount of energy. Before long, his stronger units completely overwhelmed the boss and everything nearby. A notification followed stating that he had reached level 8, and a pile of loot materialized. Lin Fong was disappointed to see the reward was only a 10-point increase in stamina. He scoffed, calling it useless. It wasn't even as good as the buff he got from eating a batch of his supercrops. A settlement notification then calculated the dungeon rewards. It confirmed his current classes, Farmer and Necromancer, before distributing the corresponding loot. Lin Fong realized that the dungeon settlement had actually given him 2 sets of rewards. He wondered, if he was a dual-class user and dungeon rewards could be doubled, perhaps there was room for manipulation using the crops he grew as well. Outside the dungeon, the other students were stunned. They refused to believe he had completed the run alone. They insisted it was impossible, claiming he must have just stepped into the cave for show without actually going deep inside. Someone pointed out that he was completely clean. There was no way he had fought against a pack of demonic beasts without getting a speck of dirt on him. Lin Fong ignored the speculation and went straight to the instructor to turn in the mission. When the instructor checked the results, she was shocked that he had actually passed and done it solo. Lin Fong simply laughed and smiled. The instructor informed Lin Fong that she would submit the mission scroll to the Academic Affairs Office. She warned him that solo clearing a dungeon was far too risky. If a freshman died right after entering the academy, it would create a huge liability. Lin Fong thanked her and said he understood. She told him that the final instructor interview would begin in the academy auditorium and suggested he rest first. After leaving the building, Lin Fong noticed that everyone around him kept staring. Meanwhile, the instructor silently hoped another teacher would drill some caution into him, as surviving in the academy would be difficult if he remained this reckless. Lin Fong continued walking when he sensed 2 people trailing him. He quietly began preparing his magic while the 2 monitored him from a distance. One whispered that since he had solo cleared the dungeon, his strength clearly wasn't simple, wondering if they were making a mistake. Another dismissed the concern, pointing out that no matter how strong he was still under level 10, so his power was limited. A third noted that Lin Fong had just come out of the dungeon and must have consumed a lot of energy, and no one had seen him recover. They planned to overwhelm with numbers. They were clearly after the Demon Bear Gale reward that granted 10 stamina. When they saw him walking farther away, they panicked and decided to act immediately. They called out for him to stop, shouting, "Hey farmer, Lin Fong!" Stopped. "Are you shouting at me?" They struck strange poses and accused him of hoarding so many rewards by himself, asking if he wasn't afraid of bursting from them. One claimed he must have gotten dog luck to pick up such a bargain. Another demanded that he hand over the Demon Bear Gale and the skill scroll. The third warned him to be sensible, or they would teach a mere farmer the power of a combat class. Lin Fong was a little embarrassed by the scene. "Why, out of all the examinees did you choose me?" one of them sneered. "Are you pretending not to know?" Another explained that the exclusive reward for a solo clear the Demon Bear Gale was valuable because it added 10 stamina, an item a farmer had no business holding. Lin Fong couldn't believe the fuss. He thought that if 10 stamina was considered amazing, then the watermelons he grew every summer could add the same amount without needing to struggle through a dungeon. He casually asked, "Is the item you're talking about this one?" The moment they saw the item, all three became greedy and demanded that Lin Fong hand it over, but before anyone could touch it, the item burst into flames and was instantly destroyed. A voice suddenly rang out. "What do you think you're doing?" The level 7 girl from earlier, Ailing, had arrived. She reminded them that private fighting was prohibited inside the academy and asked if they wanted to be disqualified. One of the boys told her the matter had nothing to do with her and that she shouldn't interfere. Ailing replied that if she couldn't stand watching it happen, then it absolutely did have something to do with her. She warned them to leave immediately, or she would report them to the instructor. The boys told her to go ahead and report, assuming she wouldn't get the chance. Since she insisted on protecting a farmer, they decided to deal with her as well. They rushed forward, declaring they would finish things quickly. Lin Fong wondered if she could handle the situation. Since she was a level 7 class user, she should be strong enough to deal with a few small fry. Ailing suggested that they join forces, but when she turned around, Lin Fong had already disappeared. From somewhere off to the side, Lin Fong tossed something back to her. "Thanks for the help. That item is yours now." Ailing stared in disbelief as all three enemies charged at her. She wondered how she had gone from helping someone to being robbed. Later, inside a temporary independent restroom, Lin Fong examined the skill scroll that had dropped in the dungeon. It seemed useless in its current state. Wondering why, he began injecting mana into it. A notification appeared. Realize new skill, Special Cultivation Beginner, consumes mana and specific materials to cultivate and strengthen undead summons. Has a chance to increase their level, improve quality, or unlock new skills. Lin Fong confirmed that it worked, and realized he needed to infuse mana from both of his classes simultaneously to activate it. He summoned his units and decided to test the new skill. After using Special Cultivation, both of his main summons advanced to level 8. The Demon-Horned Bear reached level 9, and the Demon-Horned Lizard Eagle advanced to level 7. Lin Fong was very satisfied with the results. Seeing how powerful his newly strengthened summons had become, Lin Fong couldn't help thinking that the only downside was not having new land to experiment on. He didn't want to ruin the fields at home just to test strange crops. He then spotted the girl from earlier. She called him Demon Bear Guy. But Lin Fong simply laughed and reminded her that the item belonged to her. She insisted that something so valuable couldn't possibly be given away for free. But Lin Fong still couldn't understand why anyone would treat such rotten material like a treasure. She wondered if she heard him correctly. Rotten? Later, Lin Fong headed deep into the forest, checking his surroundings to make sure no one was nearby. He began channeling his magic, wanting to see what effect the new skill might have on crops. A monstrous plant sprouted, but at first glance, it didn't seem any different from before. Then he noticed something shocking. The crop was moving. He stared in disbelief, amazed that the plants could actually animate on their own. Meanwhile, a spirit energy detector registered unusual readings, and someone began tracking them. Tuka sensed a necromancer's aura and rushed to investigate. Convinced his guess was right, he planned to eliminate the source immediately. He soon came across Lin Fong, who happened to be walking past. Tuka grabbed him by the shoulder. "Are you a farmer?" Lin Fong wondered if Tuka had been personally wronged by a farmer in the past or something. Disgust flashed across Tuka's face as he pulled his hand back. He demanded to know whether Lin Fong had seen a suspicious person nearby. Lin Fong was briefly caught off guard, but he replied calmly, "Actually, I have." Tuka urgently asked, "Where?" Lin Fong pointed a finger straight at him, saying the person was right there. Tuka was furious that a mere farmer dared to speak to him that way. He declared himself an elite of the Sunhei Academy and the nephew of the Iron Lion Duke. For a lowly farmer to be so rude was unforgivable, and he threatened to take Lin Fong down on the spot. Deep in the woods, Tuka's roar echoed as his body began to twist and change. Enraged by Lin Fong's words, he vowed that the farmer would pay a heavy price for his stupidity. His fury triggered a beast form transformation. His size expanded, muscles bulged, and his aura blasted through the forest, shaking the trees and sending rubble flying. Lin Fong had to shield his face just to keep the debris out of his eyes. "Taste this," Lin Fong muttered. He was thinking about the monkshood in his field. It had accidentally been corroded by undead mana, gaining a potent paralysis effect. The last time he tried some himself, he had been numb and unable to move for an entire day. Ground into powder, the stuff functioned perfectly as a natural anesthetic. He tossed the powder toward the raging beast. Tuka, blinded by anger, inhaled it without realizing. Within moments, his vision blurred, his limbs weakened, and a wave of dizziness hit him hard. He couldn't believe his strength was suddenly draining away. Tuka demanded to know what method Lin Fong had used. Lin Fong calmly stood there, fingers pinching his nose shut so he wouldn't inhale any of the powder himself. He explained that it was just monkshood powder, something commonly found in the fields, the very places Tuka claimed to despise. Now, that simple farmer's material had completely taken down the Duke's nephew. Lin Fong asked whether he still believed farmers were useless. If so, he called him stupid, noting that farmers could do plenty of crazy things, sometimes even surpassing and defeating combat classes. Then, while Tuka lay paralyzed, Lin Fong walked up and delivered a solid punch straight to his beast form head. Later, when the transformation finally wore off, Tuka was left bound tightly to a tree. Lin Fong told him that if he couldn't even beat a farmer, he had no right calling himself an elite. He said he'd leave him there to cool off, and when someone eventually found him, he should consider it a lesson learned. Suddenly, an academy-wide announcement blared, calling for all candidates to gather at the auditorium for the instructor interview. Lin Fong realized the interview was starting and rushed off. He absolutely couldn't miss this. Outside the extraordinary academy auditorium, crowds had gathered. Many candidates weren't even interested in studying. They were just there for the girls, dreaming of a luxurious, carefree life funded entirely by their families, enjoying everything without effort or responsibility before real life eventually crushed their dreams. The pampered boys outside the auditorium gossiped as Lin Fong walked by. Someone whispered that he was the one who solo cleared the level 5 dungeon. Another claimed he only knew how to run away and live off a woman. Someone else sneered that he was far worse than Sai and Bu. Another added that while Lin Fong might be strong compared to normal candidates, he himself was a level 5 elite, so the advantage was clearly his. Ailing approached Lin Fong and tried handing the item back again, insisting she didn't want to keep it. Lin Fong repeated that she should keep it. He had no use for it at all. He casually munched on a crop and a notification popped up. Temporary Constitution +2. Temporary Constitution +2. People nearby were still staring at him instead of paying attention to their dates, who suddenly seemed less interesting compared to the mysterious farmer who cleared a dungeon alone. Lin Fong, however, didn't understand the fuss. He wondered why everyone treated such junk like treasure. Were they all idiots? Inside the auditorium, rows of instructors sat behind long tables. One of them announced that the interview process was mutual, while instructors chose their students. Students also chose their instructors. They were meant to make each other successful. Students whose names are called step forward. The first candidate called was Xian. He walked forward, introduced himself as a level 6 Earth attribute warrior, and demonstrated his ability by summoning rock armor. Aura surged around him, and his stone armor looked solid and impressive, though nothing compared to Master Chief. One instructor nodded in approval and introduced himself as a level 44 Earth berserker, asking if Xian would like him as a mentor. Xian agreed immediately, practically vibrating with excitement. Next, a student named Wu was called. Then, Lin Fong. He stood up and walked toward the panel. Even now, people all around continue staring at him with that same thick mix of jealousy, suspicion, and hatred. Even with the stares and whispered judgments drilling into his back, Lin Fong walked forward without a care. He introduced himself calmly. "I am Lin Fong, level 8. Occupation, Spirit Farm Lord." His aura flared out. Several girls quietly gasped. One whispered that reaching level 8 at his age was impressive. Another pointed out that he was still just a farmer and that she wasn't interested in farmers. A guy scoffed that the extraordinary academy existed to train elites for the front lines, not to raise ordinary people into future cannon fodder. Another instructor tried to calm the rising tension, noting that Lin Fong's preliminary test and retest results were both excellent, so he clearly had skill and talent. The director cleared his throat and suggested conducting a combat ability assessment since opinions differed so much. All the instructors immediately agreed. One woman approved with a simple nod, while another instructor muttered that he didn't care either way. He just wanted to go home and eat something nice. The director turned to Lin Fong. "Are you willing?" He reminded him that the ultimate purpose of training here was to send talent to the front lines against the demon clan. Without combat potential, joining the front lines would only result in meaningless sacrifice. Lin Fong's mind raced. A combat ability test. Right now, openly fighting would risk revealing his necromancer abilities, something he absolutely could not allow. He needed to be extremely cautious. For now, he forced a pleasant smile, hiding every trace of unease. "I agree." Later, at a temporary clearing within the auditorium grounds, everyone gathered to watch. The examiner, a powerful instructor, stood across from Lin Fong. He explained that the test was simple. Survive for 5 minutes against him to prove he had combat potential. The moment the instructor activated his power, the ground trembled. His aura surged outward like a storm. The watching students buckled under the pressure. Many were forced to their knees, unable to withstand the weight of his spiritual force. They whispered in awe, asking whether this was truly the pressure of someone above level 40. Suddenly, everyone in the audience froze. Through the crushing pressure of a level 44 instructor, they saw something that made their jaws drop. A normal little farmer was still standing there. He wasn't trembling, wasn't on his knees, and wasn't gasping for breath like everyone else. He was simply bowing slightly while striking a pose suspiciously similar to Iron Man charging his repulsors. Someone whispered in disbelief that the guy was acting like nothing was happening. The instructor seemed impressed and praised him, saying that just for his persistence, he would look highly upon him. He encouraged Lin Fong to use all his abilities and attack with full power. Hearing that, Lin Fong sprang into action. He admitted inwardly that the pressure of a level 44 expert was indeed terrifying, but it was still within what he could handle for now. He gathered mana in his hands, forming a glowing orb, and called out, "Come out, my servants!" Wrapped in spiraling threads of nature mana, the undead summon began materializing. Lin Fong felt relieved. It worked. Masking undead creatures with nature mana effectively hid their necromancer aura. It was the only way he could safely summon without exposing his forbidden abilities. A vague, cabbage-shaped bear silhouette emerged first. Lin Fong thought that honestly, who would ever guess this cabbage-headed bear was actually an undead? When the summoning finished, the audience gasped. They commented that it looked like a rare variant occupation, marveling at the richness of the nature, mana, surrounding the creature. Interest crackled through the crowd. They were finally seeing something unusual. The instructor drew his blades, both covered in their own blazing aura. The summon and the instructor stood face to face. The instructor had no idea what kind of monster he was about to fight. Both charged at each other at full speed, and their clash sent shockwaves of aura rippling across the clearing. The instructor began attacking wildly, screaming as he pushed forward. The summon staggered under the barrage, showing signs of strain. Watching from the sidelines, the director commented that the summon was remarkably loyal. Any other summoned creature would have been forcibly unsummoned after taking that much damage, but this one was still stubbornly pushing forward, even throwing punches. The instructor dodged, and the director clicked his tongue in disappointment, wondering if Old G was simply too weak. He couldn't understand why the fight looked so unimpressive from Old G's side. Meanwhile, Lin Fong remained completely calm. He knew the truth. They're undead. They don't feel pain, and they don't make a fuss. These flesh wounds only take a tiny bit of mana to recover from. That's why they don't care. The instructor, however, was thinking that he had originally just wanted to show off in front of the students, but he hadn't expected Lin Fong to actually be pretty talented. The disappointed look on the director's face was unbearable, so he decided he needed to use something real. He told Lin Fong not to worry, and that he would compensate him later for the destroyed summon. Then he told him to watch closely. Normally, summoners had to pay a steep price to form contracts with their creatures. Once a summon died, the contract ended, finished, gone for good. That was common knowledge. The instructor activated his berserker skill, Bloodthirst. With a massive punch, the undead summon was knocked backward. Its form cracked apart like shattered stone and then dissolved, disappearing completely. The instructor stood smugly with his arms crossed, clearly satisfied with himself. He confidently announced that Lin Fong must feel terrible having his summon destroyed, adding that it was fine to cry it out. He liked students with genuine emotions. In the instructor's imagination, Lin Fong was already sniffling like a pitiful farmer child whose toy had been broken. But reality was the exact opposite. Lin Fong stood there completely expressionless, not sad, not panicked, not even mildly bothered. His face was so unreadable that no one could figure out what he was thinking. The instructor was confused. He wondered if Lin Fong was so overwhelmed with sadness that he'd gone numb. However, the next moment, countless vines burst out from beneath Lin Fong's feet. They wrapped forward like serpents, flying straight toward the instructor and binding him tightly before he could even blink. Shocked, he yelled angrily, demanding to know what was happening and accusing Lin Fong of playing dirty by having so many summons. The vines squeezed until the instructor struggled, until suddenly, with a furious shout and a surge of power, he snapped them apart. The director finally intervened, telling them both to stop. He declared that Lin Fong had proven himself and was qualified to become a student of the Extraordinary Academy. However, he added that all nature-type instructors were currently deployed at the battlefield, so there was no one available to teach Lin Fong for the time being. Lin Fong immediately asked the most important question. Then, what about my cultivation resources? The director assured Lin Fong that the academy would never deduct anyone's cultivation resources. Everything would be issued normally according to standard. He added that since Lin Fong had performed exceptionally in the exam, he was allowed to make one special request. Hearing that, Lin Fong felt like heaven had opened. Freedom and resources, truly a paradise. So, he immediately said, "Then I want a piece of land." The director blinked. That was absolutely not what he expected. For most students, a request like this was the moment to demand high-grade equipment, rare cultivation treasures, or maybe even a luxurious private hall where they could dance with beautiful girls until morning instead of studying. But this kid was different. The director confirmed if Lin Fong really didn't want any precious resources or high-tier items and only wanted land. Lin Fong laughed and explained, "I am a spirit farm lord. Without land, how could I call myself one?" The director nodded and agreed. He told Lin Fong there was a piece of abandoned training wasteland in the west of the city that had been idle for a long time. He granted Lin Fong permission to use it, however he wanted. This was exactly what Lin Fong had hoped for. He thanked the director sincerely. The instructors then told him to go rest backstage. Later, inside a quiet room, Lin Fong's file sat on a table. An instructor looked over it and murmured that Spirit Farm Lord was quite an interesting occupation. A female instructor entered urgently and told the principal she had something important to report. The principal asked what it was. She handed him a delicate scroll-like object. When he opened it, the contents were shocking. The report confirmed that Tuka, their investigation team member searching for Hisha, had been murdered by a necromancer. His body had been discovered not far from the auditorium. The report stated they suspected a necromancer had infiltrated the academy. This was a monumental problem, one that could shake the entire institution. But Lin Fong hadn't killed Tuka. He had only tied him up to teach him a lesson. Whoever finished the job had framed Lin Fong deliberately. And in a place where everyone already looked down on farmers, we know exactly who they'd point their fingers at first. At the training wasteland in the west of the city, Lin Fong walked across the barren ground while checking the paper in his hand. He confirmed aloud that this was indeed the place mentioned, the training wasteland in the west of Fenyuan City. A soft green glow formed in his palm as he activated the land assignment spell. A notification appeared. 100 MU of training land, west of Fenyuan City ownership, Extraordinary Academy temporary rental agreement, 1-year exclusion barrier, activated, student Lin Fong only. Lin Fong clicked his tongue and commented that giving him only 1 year was a little stingy, but considering that most students would be heading to the battlefield after a year anyway, it was understandable. Besides, he was thrilled he now had a whole 100% MU of land entirely under his control for an entire year. He thought this was what deserved to be called a spirit farmstead master. Everyone else might look down on the occupation, but the true madness hidden within it was something only he knew. It would allow him to control the situation from the shadows while staying above all of them. He pointed a finger upward, aura swirling violently around him, and summoned all his undead companions to the field. "Now," he said, "let's get to work." Immediately, the entire group of summons scattered across the land. Some were plowing the soil, others were handling water channels. Some zipped across the ground like tractors, tilling rows at incredible speed. Meanwhile, Lin Fong relaxed under the sunlight, stretching comfortably. "Magic really does change lives," he sighed. "The ancients truly didn't deceive me." Suddenly, someone tapped him on the shoulder. Lin Fong assumed the reclamation work was done and commented that their initiative must be stronger than he expected, but one of the undead only buzzed in response. Lin Fong inspected him closely and sighed. Expecting undead to have independent consciousness is still too much, he thought. Feeling slightly disappointed, he walked away. Unbeknownst to him, the celestial undead behind him looked confused, then smirked faintly, a hint of intelligence Lin Fong completely missed. Lin Fong entered the greenhouse where he began inspecting the plants inside. Floating notifications hovered above each crop: stamina +1 permanently, unripe attack power +1 permanently, unripe life +1 temporarily. Unripe. Seeing the glowing notifications above the plants, Lin Fong felt genuinely happy. He thought that while other people cultivated their strength through long, bitter training, he could improve using crops, balanced nutrition, and a solid foundation. It was truly a blessing. He also felt it was a pity that only he could make crops with these effects. If he could increase the yield and let everyone improve through his plants, wouldn't the demon clan be nothing more than clay chickens and pottery dogs before them? After tending to the greenhouse, he realized that just planting the special crops wouldn't be enough. He needed to plant plenty of ordinary crops outside to camouflage everything. Otherwise, the greenhouse secrets would be discovered, and that was the last thing he could afford. Exposure would ruin all of the insane plans he was crafting in his mind. So, for now, he simply rolled up his sleeves and got to work. 3 days later, the wasteland had completely transformed, bigger, greener, and more alive than anything it had been in years. Lin Fong stood in the middle of the field, shovel in hand, demonstrating to his larger summons how to dig properly. He asked if they understood, and hoped they would finally grasp what he meant. A few of the undead still looked confused as they clumsily mimicked his movements, but at least they were trying. He sighed with satisfaction, thinking that having this group of helpers made planting vegetables much faster. Then he noticed one of them doing something suspicious. Lin Fong shouted, "Hey, what are you doing?" The frightened undead flinched. He had been happily munching on a plump potato. Lin Fong marched over, and the undead stiffened in fear before slowly turning his head. At that moment, a notification appeared. Undead lizard, level 6, temporary status, bone density increasing temporarily, defense increasing temporarily. Lin Fong stared in disbelief. All the undead lizards were his gains from the previous dungeon. The only difference was that this one had eaten a potato. He wondered whether undead could also receive the effects of spiritual crops. If that were true, wouldn't that be absolutely insane? In the days that followed, Lin Fong began systematically experimenting, feeding different crops to different undead and carefully recording every change, every buff, and every mutation. The research of a true spirit farmstead master had officially begun. Another figure appeared near the training wasteland, moving silently between the crops and shadows. He frowned as he observed the surroundings. He thought it was strange. When he probed the area earlier, none of these structures or plants had existed. The barrier around the land seemed flimsy to him, nothing more than a paper-thin, marshy wall. He concluded he could tear through it with a single slash. He spotted only one person inside and wondered if the whole thing was a trap. The idea intrigued him. Just as he stepped forward, something beneath him triggered. He sensed it too late. He tried to stop whatever was happening, but chaos erupted instantly. Something burst out of the soil and exploded right beneath him. The sudden blast startled him, though he managed to dodge at the last second. He scoffed, saying that this level of trickery wasn't enough to deal with him. But then, more of those explosive things began erupting from underground. Angry, pulsing, swelling with unstable energy. Now, even the intruder felt a chill crawl up his spine. He cursed, demanding to know what these things were. A chain of massive explosions followed, so intense that the shock waves were visible from far away. The blasts all seemed rooted to a glowing green form deep beneath the ground. A magnificent being, like a fragment of the Earth's own spirit that Lin Fong had grown, watching the intruder with eerie, luminous eyes through the thick smoke. The intruder staggered back. He cursed again, muttering that if he didn't need to gain the Duke's trust, he would never have come here a second time. He vowed that once he cut Lin Fong down, he wanted to see whether these explosions could stop him. He then began slicing through everything: roots, plants, vines, and all the careful work Lin Fong and his undead had put into the field. He didn't care about the effort, he only cared about destruction. But as he hacked through the growth, something unusual caught his attention. He paused and sensed a faint aura. An aura belonging to the undead. His expression changed. A memory surfaced, one from a wise priest. On this reconnaissance trip to Fenyuan City, your main mission is to find the Necromancer, Hisha. After our last contact, he disappeared. He has an agreement with our clan. The intruder's eyes narrowed. He wondered if this place was actually Hisha's hiding spot. But why would Hisha hide here of all places? Could he have betrayed their clan? The intruder clicked his tongue, thinking that for the secret technique of immortality, a traitor like Hisha really had no shame at all. The intruder felt an even stronger surge of energy pulsing from the plants around him. The longer he stayed, the more unstable the aura became. He decided it was better not to linger. Finding Hisha was the priority. Night turned to day. Lin Fong woke up, grabbed his tools, and headed out cheerfully. He'd already catalyzed and fertilized most of the fields yesterday. Today he would handle the remaining areas. But the moment he opened his eyes fully and looked ahead, he froze. His jaw dropped. He stared for several seconds, speechless. Then he dropped his tool with a loud clatter and sprinted toward the greenhouse. His heart pounded. His mind blanked. My greenhouse, everything he had so carefully grown, looked devastated. Above him, several figures suddenly descended from the sky. Lin Fong braced himself, thinking they were enemies. But after getting a closer look, he muttered in confusion. Why would enforcement team members appear here? The enforcement officers landed and scanned the area. One of them announced that their demonic energy detector showed the source of the disturbance right at this location. They wondered why the training wasteland suddenly looked like this, and questioned whether demon clan members might be lurking nearby. A notification popped up before them. This land has already been leased. The officers exchanged glances, so it wasn't unowned land after all. Still, they insisted that they couldn't rule out demon clan activity and needed to be cautious. One of them addressed Lin Fong politely, saying they were from the enforcement team, but the atmosphere was far from welcoming. Lin Fong felt extremely uneasy. Why would the enforcement team come here of all places? The lead officer explained that their instruments had detected demonic energy here and asked Lin Fong to open the barrier to allow them inside for inspection. Another added that even they weren't clear on the exact situation yet. Lin Fong's stomach tightened. Demonic energy on the land he'd only rented a few days ago. How was that possible? Before he could respond, someone from the back, clearly irritated and impatient, snapped, "How long does it take just to get a farmer to open a barrier? Tuka was just killed by the demon clan and now demon aura appears here. If you ask me, he's a spy." The man's tone was cold and venomous. His expression was deadly serious. Even Lin Fong felt a chill run down his spine. One of the enforcement members pointed straight at Lin Fong and coldly ordered him to surrender, calling him a spy. His expression made it clear he was ready to do whatever it took. He wasn't about to show mercy to a lowly farmer. Another enforcement member spoke up, suggesting that the captain might be acting a bit impulsively. After all, 2 people had just died, and demonic energy had appeared here again. Under those circumstances, Lin Fong was indeed highly suspicious. In truth, both enforcement members were already wary of Lin Fong. The fact that he was a farmer made them even more suspicious. In their eyes, a farmer couldn't possibly cause something like this on his own, so the only explanation was that he must be a spy who didn't act directly but instead helped the demon clan from behind the scenes. One of them asked Lin Fong to cooperate with the investigation and open the barrier. Lin Fong felt his heart sink. He knew he absolutely couldn't let them in. After everything that had happened inside the field, letting the enforcement team investigate freely would be disastrous. He had to find a way to drive them away. Putting on an innocent, almost pitiful expression, he said that his class was lowly and he had always been looked down upon. He explained that he only wanted to quietly cultivate and improve himself in peace. Yet now, even the enforcement team was suspecting him. He asked if they really thought someone like him could do such things, and whether a person couldn't even ask for a bit of peace anymore. One of the enforcement members was visibly shaken and turned to the captain, saying that Lin Fong already seemed miserable enough, and questioning whether they really needed to push this further. The captain, however, wasn't fooled in the slightest. He barked back that anyone could pretend to be pitiful and that he wouldn't fall for such tricks. He clearly believed Lin Fong was just acting. Without another word, the captain raised his fist and charged forward, striking straight toward Lin Fong with tremendous force. He didn't hold back at all, either because he didn't care that Lin Fong was a farmer or because he believed Lin Fong was far stronger than he looked. If Lin Fong had truly been an ordinary farmer, that punch would have crippled him on the spot. But instead, Lin Fong caught the captain's fist. Lin Fong immediately realized something was wrong. He had added too much to his constitution. Normally he wouldn't have felt that punch at all, but now he had to pretend. so even though he had already stopped the captain's fist, he deliberately staggered back, acting as if he had been hit brutally. The captain stared at him in disbelief. He muttered that he had used so much force in that strike, yet Lin Fong was still alive. Something was clearly wrong. No matter how pitiful Lin Fong tried to look, the captain's suspicion only deepened. At this point, it felt like he genuinely wanted Lin Fong dead. Lin Fong accused him of trying to torture a confession just to close the case quickly. He leaned harder into the act, looking like an oppressed, miserable little farmer. This time, another enforcement member finally snapped. He grabbed the captain's arm and told him to calm down. He pointed out that what Lin Fong was using was nature magic. The demon clan despised anything related to nature. This was common knowledge, something even a 6-year-old would know. The captain hesitated. He realized he might have gone a bit too far. Still, since Lin Fong was just a lowly farmer, he didn't feel much guilt. Beating a farmer didn't count as a crime in his eyes. The calmer enforcement members stepped forward and apologized, saying they had misunderstood the situation. Lin Fong's nature magic was extremely pure, and they promised to clarify everything properly in the report. Lin Fong immediately latched onto that lifeline, thanking the officer and calling him a just and righteous lord. The man replied that it was simply his duty, and apologized again for the captain's excessive behavior. But behind them, the captain's anger hadn't cooled at all. Watching this scene only irritated him further. He raised his hand again, preparing an even more vicious strike. Before he could act, the other enforcement members stepped in front of Lin Fong. They refused to let any more injustice happen, and made it clear they wouldn't allow him to cross the line again. That only enraged the captain further. But with his own team standing against him, he had no choice. With a cold snort, he mounted his dragon and left. Lin Fong watched them disappear into the distance and sighed inwardly. This is troublesome. Farming alone clearly wasn't enough anymore. He needed real power for self-preservation. Just then, a paper bird fluttered down in front of him and spoke in a crisp voice. Freshman Lin Fong, please gather at the Academy drill grounds tomorrow morning to participate in the new student capability assessment and grading battles. The message ended with a firm reminder that absence was not permitted, stamped by the Extraordinary Academy Academic Affairs Office. After reading it, Lin Fong let out a long sigh. He wondered why living a peaceful life was so difficult. Trouble kept piling up one after another, as if the world was determined not to let him stay low-key for even a moment. Elsewhere, 2 figures stood quietly observing. One of them, a woman, remarked that the nature magic she sensed was both pure and extremely potent. She asked the principal if the child was really just a farmer. The principal admitted he wasn't sure. According to the system, Lin Fong's profession was spirit farmstead master. The woman raised an eyebrow, surprised that someone like her, a level 50 nature-type archmage named Vera, would take an interest. She speculated that it sounded like a mutated class, and that the boy clearly had secrets. Still, she said that the nature magic alone was enough to clear him of any suspicion of colluding with the demon clan. The demon clan couldn't possibly fake such a strong life aura, one that would actually make them sick just by being near it. The principal agreed, saying that certain people should calm down now. He added that the real show was only just beginning. An aura wrapped around the 2 of them, and they vanished from sight, having already obtained what they came for. Later, at the Extraordinary Academy freshman drill grounds, crowds of students gathered, buzzing with complaints. Someone asked why there was another test when the interviews and instructor selections were already done. Another complained that the academy seemed to be throwing test after test at them without any logic. Someone else claimed to have insider information and teased the others, only to immediately say he wasn't telling. Lin Fong stood quietly among them, uninterested in what he thought were pointless ramblings from a bunch of idiots. Soon, a female instructor arrived and ordered everyone to be silent. She acknowledged that they all had questions, especially about why an all-student entrance assessment was being held after the instructor interviews. She explained that urgent military intelligence had arrived from the front lines the previous day. The demon clan's offensive had intensified, and the fortress outside the 3rd barrier was now in critical danger. The academy had received direct orders to immediately dispatch a batch of vital forces to provide support. The students were stunned. One of them blurted out in disbelief that they had just enrolled and now they were being sent toward the front lines. Another student protested that they had been told they would first study and cultivate. The instructor calmly replied, "If the nest is overturned, how can the eggs remain intact? If the fortress falls, the demon clan's spearhead will point straight at Fenuan City." At that point, she asked, "Did you really think you could still cultivate peacefully inside the academy?" She made it clear that this was not a request, it was a conscription. In humanity's time of peril, no one was allowed to stay out of it. The crowd fell silent. A small boy hesitantly called out to the girl beside him, but before he could finish, Lin Fong was already standing quietly nearby. The girl gently reassured the boy not to worry, though she couldn't help thinking about Lin Fong. He was clearly outstanding, and she wondered whether he would be selected for the conscription. The instructor then ordered all freshmen to follow instructions and enter the drill grounds to prepare for the practical combat assessment. As others eagerly rushed forward, Lin Fong hung back. He thought that as a farmer class user, he probably wouldn't be selected for the front lines at this stage. Otherwise, all of his farming plans would be completely disrupted. Soon, Lin Fong found himself facing a female opponent. She commented that she had heard the spirit farmstead master was good at hiding. Striking a dramatic pose, she declared that he would turn to ash beneath her flames. Fire surged beneath her feet, lifting her into the air as blazing waves spread outward. Her attack was fast and fierce, but Lin Fong still sidestepped it effortlessly. He remarked that it was too slow and that her magic condensation was insufficient. He even added that her fire couldn't roast the sweet potatoes in his field. That comment enraged her. She immediately began chanting again, calling upon a greater fire spirit. Flames erupted even more violently this time, but Lin Fong had no interest in seeing what else she could do. He just wanted the match to end quickly. He stepped in and struck, pointing out that her wind-up was far too long and that such techniques would never work in real combat. She was sent flying. The result was announced. Lin Fong wins. Battle after battle followed. Lin Fong versus Ryan. Lin Fong versus Zomo. Lin Fong versus Lin Zishi. Lin Fong versus Luna. Lin Fong versus Bull. Lin Fong versus Gramble. Lin Fong won every single match. After so many consecutive victories, he finally thought that this should be more than enough. If things continued like this, he figured he could afford to lose the next few matches. A woman approached Lin Fong and told him that with his current talent and potential, he was fully qualified to aim for a higher platform. Lin Fong thanked her politely, though he honestly had no idea what this higher platform was supposed to mean. She explained that by accumulating credits and passing further assessments, he could advance to the higher-level Sunhei Academy. There, he would have access to better cultivation methods, stronger instructors, and might even obtain legendary weapons or powerful demonic beast mounts. Lin Fong thanked her again but said he didn't really need any of that. After all, he had already seen dragons flying around. Those things didn't impress him much anymore. The woman was taken aback and asked what he actually wanted if none of those things interested him. Lin Fong pointed calmly and said, "I only want a better and larger piece of land where I can farm in peace." That answer shocked her. She clarified that she meant his ultimate goal, what he intended to do after finishing farming those lands. Lin Fong replied, "I plan to farm more land, let more people have land to farm, and make it so that anyone who wants to farm will be able to do so." Vera was clearly surprised. She thought that this child actually wanted to reclaim land on a large scale, and found his ambition unexpectedly enormous. At that moment, the principal arrived and asked whether the wasteland in the west of the city that Lin Fong was already developing wasn't enough for him. Lin Fong felt a little embarrassed and laughed, replying that when it came to farming, the more land, the better. Soon after, the next match was announced, Lin Fong versus Ailing. Lin Fong immediately responded and headed toward the battlefield. Both the principal and Vera noticed him moving. The principal commented that the kid was quite honest. Vera said that since the child wanted it, they might as well give it to him. When the principal asked whether she intended to take him in, Vera replied that he was a very interesting kid. The announcement for battle preparation sounded. Ailing stepped forward and said that she hadn't expected to fight Lin Fong, but that she would go all out in this battle. Her expression was extremely serious. Lin Fong, however, said frankly, "I can't beat you. I originally planned to concede." To a Ling, those words felt like pure humiliation. Her expression darkened as she charged forward, accusing him of mocking her. Now she was even angrier than before. Lin Fong immediately sensed something was wrong. He realized that a Ling had jumped straight into her second combat phase without any hesitation, and muttered to himself, wondering if this was really how she liked to fight. He quickly began preparing his own farm aura. Thick vines burst out of the ground and surged toward a Ling, wrapping around her limbs. The sudden counter caught her off guard. She had been charging forward at full speed, but now she was forced to stop and deal with the vines first. With a sharp shout, she unleashed a powerful kick and shattered them, breaking free with brute force. Watching the exchange, Vera couldn't help commenting that a student under level 10 possessing such pure magic power was astonishing. The principal agreed, admitting that he had been shocked the first time he saw it as well. Both of them leaned forward, growing more and more interested. Vera added that even a renowned nature cultivator who had reached level 80 didn't possess magic power as pure as Lin Feng's. She concluded that this child's future achievements would be limitless. As fiery bursts from a ling collided with the restraining vines summoned by Lin Feng, the scene left them genuinely impressed. The principal remarked that such a high-quality seedling was extremely rare and that with proper guidance, his growth would be terrifying. Before he could finish, Vera spoke decisively, saying she had already made up her mind. She wanted to take Lin Feng as her teacher. She repeated herself to be absolutely clear. The principal nodded at first, saying it wouldn't be bad if she became his teacher, then suddenly froze. Something felt very wrong. He turned to her slowly and asked if she had said that backward. Vera calmly replied that she hadn't misspoken. She meant exactly what she said. She wanted to take Lin Feng as her teacher. The principal stared at her in disbelief and demanded to know whether her brain had been burned by the demon clan. Vera replied that even if it had been burned, she would still make the same decision. She was clearly far too impressed by Lin Feng and perhaps wanted something more than just a teacher-student relationship. At the extraordinary Academy freshman drill grounds, a high-speed, fierce battle was underway. Both fighters were going all out, their power clashing again and again. Lin Feng thought to himself that he had already shown enough strength. He figured if he pretended to weaken and admitted defeat now, everything would go exactly according to his plan. But suddenly, a voice called out from behind, warning him that if he kept slacking off, the academy would take back the land in the west of the city and give it to someone else. Hearing that, Lin Feng's expression shifted instantly. This is bad, he thought. He couldn't allow that to happen. Taking back the land was absolutely unacceptable. Even the woman fighting him noticed the shift. Just moments ago he had been defending passively, but now his aura had completely changed. He was no longer holding back. Green, plant-like energy began flowing through his body as he channeled it into his hand. The woman braced herself, gathering flames to form a massive fireball. She launched it straight toward him without hesitation. Lin Feng stepped forward and punched right through the attack, shattering the flames instantly. He told her to take his serious punch. As the attack rushed toward her, fear flashed through her mind. She could feel just how terrifying the power behind it was. Lin Feng then calmly told her she should just let him win. The spectators were completely shocked. One of them remarked that Lin Feng, the so-called farmer, had been hiding his true strength all along. Another added that, compared to him, they looked like the real farmers. The woman examined herself and admitted that this level of control over nature was terrifying. She said it was like commanding power as easily as moving one's own fingers, something close to the origin itself. The result was announced. Lin Feng was declared the winner. She acknowledged her defeat sincerely, saying she accepted it wholeheartedly. Lin Feng responded humbly, saying that she was the truly strong one and that he only had a bit more raw strength. Inside, however, he dwelled on how close he had come to losing that land. Just then, the teacher stepped forward and praised him, saying that this was more like it. Lin Feng thanked him, and the principal told him to keep working hard, adding that he looked forward to seeing how far Lin Feng would go. However, as the principal walked away, Lin Feng's thoughts took a darker turn. Inside his mind, he cursed the old man, thinking that threatening him with the land was crossing the line. He silently swore that he would find a way to get back at him sooner or later. As he went about his day, that thought played on repeat in his head. The more he thought about it, the more annoyed he became. Just then, a woman approached him and politely asked if he could guide her in cultivation. Lin Feng was taken aback. He asked her if she was serious, pointing out that she was a combat-type cultivator asking a farmer for guidance. She introduced herself as Vera and said they had never met before, but she had witnessed his match. She explained that his use of natural mana was flawless, full of vitality and life, and unlike anything she had ever seen. She admitted that she had been stuck at her current realm for a long time and felt that his path might give her some insight. Lin Feng felt a bit embarrassed by the praise, though he couldn't deny it felt good. He asked if she was also a nature-type cultivator, mentioning that the academy's nature instructors were still away on the battlefield. He added that he was just a farmer and didn't really have anything to teach. Vera quickly responded that skill mattered more than status. She said she didn't need to formally become his disciple. She only wished to observe him occasionally, even if it was just watching him work in the fields. Feeling his natural aura up close would be enough for her, she said. Then she bowed deeply. Seeing her bow like that made Lin Feng panic internally. He thought that this was bad, very bad. If people found out what he was really growing in his fields, it would cause huge trouble. He immediately tried to refuse, insisting that he was only a farmer with brute strength and truly had nothing to teach. At that moment, the principal stepped in and told him to agree, saying that she was being sincere and that he should do it for his sake. He then leaned closer and whispered something into Lin Feng's ear. Hearing those words, Lin Feng froze again. Whatever the principal had said clearly hit a nerve, and he muttered that it really wasn't a good idea. But before he could object further, the matter was settled. Vera immediately thanked him excitedly, saying she would be very careful not to disturb him. She asked if she could start right away, even offering to go with him immediately. Seeing how eager she was, and remembering what the principal had whispered, Lin Feng could only sigh inwardly. Realizing he had once again been pushed into something troublesome, he told her it was up to her and mentioned that his place was on the west side of the city. Not long after, at the West City Training Wasteland greenhouse outskirts, Vera could be seen busily moving around, helping out wherever she could. She kept asking if there was anything she could do. Watching her, Lin Feng thought that her attitude was at least sincere. Still, he reminded himself that he absolutely could not let her see what was really growing inside the greenhouse. As Vera wandered around, she examined the crops and commented that she would first get familiar with the surroundings. Lin Feng told her to just take a look around the outside for now, explaining that he was busy tending to newly bred seedlings and that they required special care. While observing the plants, Vera's eyes gradually widened. She realized that the crops had all been nourished by extremely pure natural mana. They weren't ordinary at all, but high-grade plants with temporary, attribute-boosting effects. She couldn't help but say that Linfo was making her more and more curious. An hour passed and she was still examining the crops. The more she looked, the more unbelievable it felt. Finally, she asked if there was something wrong with the soil. Lin Feng casually replied that it was just ordinary soil. Vera was shocked and asked if he really hadn't used any mana crystals or elemental fertilizer. He answered honestly, saying that he had thought about it before, but those things were far too expensive for him. With his limited funds, he simply couldn't afford them. Vera stared at the crops again and muttered that they looked like they were slightly undernourished, yet somehow still thriving. Inside, she couldn't help but think that Lin Feng's natural mana was far beyond normal. If that was the case, maybe she could help him instead. She then mentioned that the academy had a regulation allowing students to exchange dungeon materials for special items at the academy warehouse. Hearing that, Lin Feng's interest was immediately piqued. He grabbed her by the shoulders and asked if what she said was true. Vera nodded and explained that, for example, the level 10 dungeon in Storm Academy, the Gloom Forest, had a boss called the Shadowfall Cobalt Chieftain. Its drop could be exchanged for a bottle of Earth Pulse. However, she added that level 10 dungeons were extremely dangerous and usually required a full team of 5 to challenge safely. She confirmed that the regulation was real, although it was going to be cancelled soon. Hearing that, Lin Feng immediately clenched his fists in excitement and said that this was perfect. He added that there was no time to waste and that he would head there right away. Vera was stunned by his reaction. She quietly thought that perhaps only someone with such a pure and straightforward heart could nurture such pure natural mana. Soon after, Lin Feng arrived at the entrance of the level 10 dungeon Gloom Forest. Few guards were standing at the gate. When they saw him approaching, one of them scoffed and asked what that farmer-looking guy was doing there, wondering if he had come to dig wild vegetables in the dungeon. Another guard laughed and pointed out that he was even carrying a hoe. Someone else recognized him and mentioned that he was the freshman named Linfo, only level 8, and questioned whether he had lost his mind trying to challenge a level 10 dungeon alone. Linf calmly took out his identification and handed it over, saying that he wanted to apply for a solo entry into Gloom Forest. The instructor on duty frowned and reminded him that his level was insufficient, and that entering alone would be extremely dangerous. However, Lin Feng calmly replied that according to academy regulations, any registered student had the right to apply. The instructor hesitated, clearly unsure. But just then, after noticing someone nearby, his expression changed. He cleared his throat and said that the regulations were indeed as stated, then reminded Lin Feng to act within his limits and retreat immediately if things became dangerous. As Lin Feng walked past, Whispers followed him from all sides. Some mocked him, saying he was an idiot who didn't know his place. Others said he was just another rookie cannon fodder who would probably die inside. A few even commented that it would be embarrassing for the academy if someone like him died in the dungeon. Ignoring them all, Lin Feng stepped into the dungeon. Inside the gloom forest, dark mist filled the air as monstrous figures began charging toward him from all directions. Seeing this, Lin Feng calmly gave an order, telling Qi, Yu and Yi clear the path and push forward. He told them to move fast and cleanly. The summoned beings immediately surged ahead, slaughtering the monsters with ease. Compared to them, the dungeon creatures were nothing. Watching the battlefield, Lin Feng calmly issued another command, saying that it was time to rise. In response, a new undead figure emerged. An existence formed from fallen remains. It was the Shadowfall Cobalt Chieftain, now reborn as an undead, its level clearly marked at 12. Seeing the final monster appear, Lin Feng immediately judged the situation. To him, this was clearly the dungeon's final boss. He felt a bit disappointed, and thought that this dungeon really wasn't much after all. Wanting to finish things quickly, he gave a simple order, telling his summons to move in. The moment the Shadowfall Cobalt Chieftain tried to attack, the summoned beings rushed forward and struck it head-on. Overwhelming power erupted, and before the monster could even struggle, it was completely crushed. A system notification appeared. It announced that the Shadowfall Cobalt Chieftain had been defeated, experience had been gained, and Lin Feng's level had increased to level 9. Another message followed stating that the chieftain's Fong had been obtained. Immediately after, a new notification appeared stating that the target could not be converted into an undead due to insufficient summoner level. Conversion failed. Seeing this, Lin Feng felt a slight sense of regret. He realized that his current level was still too low to summon such a powerful undead. Still, he wasn't too bothered. The main objective had already been completed. He glanced at the Fong in his possession and thought that since the item was secured, it was time to head back and exchange it for fertilizer. With that, he exited the dungeon. Outside the entrance, the same group of people were still gathered. Vera was among them. Someone beside her was saying that the frontline forces were already under pressure and that resources were limited, questioning whether it was really appropriate to exchange such valuable materials. Vera calmly responded that it wouldn't affect the front lines, explaining that what was being exchanged was fertilizer meant specifically for nature-type cultivators. The person hesitated but eventually admitted that they did have a decent stock of that material. At that moment, a system announcement echoed through the area. It declared that the first ever solo clear of the Gloom Forest dungeon had been achieved, naming Lin Feng as the clearer. The evaluation was listed as SS, and the reward was announced: 1 heroic spirit fragment. The crowd immediately erupted. Some people shouted in disbelief, saying that the heroic spirit fragment was an incredibly rare item capable of strengthening the soul and enhancing class potential. Others accused him of cheating, claiming that there was no way a level 8 student could solo a level 10 dungeon and receive an SS evaluation. Several people demanded a strict investigation, insisting that the academy reclaim the reward, especially the heroic spirit fragment. They argued that someone like him did not deserve it. Listening to all the noise, Vera could only sigh. She admitted that she had expected him to struggle at least a little, but she never imagined he would clear the dungeon in one go. Meanwhile, Linfo glanced around at the hostile gazes directed toward him. He felt a bit helpless, thinking that trouble always seemed to follow him no matter where he went. Still, he didn't dwell on it for long. In the end, all he wanted was to keep moving forward. At the entrance to the level 10 dungeon, Gloom Forest, everyone was looking at Lin Feng with suspicious eyes. He honestly couldn't understand why people always had to act like this. He was just a farmer who liked farming. What was so wrong with that? He calmly stepped forward and told the teacher that according to academy rules, he was there to exchange his rewards for resources. Before the teacher could respond, a guard behind him sneered and said that Lin Feng's rewards had been obtained illicitly and should be confiscated. The teacher immediately refuted that claim, stating that the rewards were issued directly by the dungeon system and that the academy had no authority to seize them. The man clearly wasn't satisfied and said that he was willing to initiate a resource wager instead. Several others nearby showed interest, clearly having waited for an opportunity like this. Lin Feng asked what a resource wager was supposed to be. The man explained that it was a winner-takes-all bet where the victor would gain both parties' rewards while the loser would lose everything. Someone else added that it would be a dungeon speedrun supervised by academy teachers to see who could clear it faster. The teacher turned to Lin Fong and asked whether he was willing to accept the wager. Lin Fong thought for a moment before saying that there was no benefit in it for him, and that it sounded boring. He asked why he should even bother. Hearing that the man grew visibly frustrated, gritting his teeth, he said that he would add a lamp of nature blueprint to the wager. At that, Lin Fong fell silent. Vera immediately leaned closer and whispered urgently, telling him that he absolutely had to get that blueprint. She explained that the lamp of nature was a growth-type magic tool exclusive to the nature department. A blueprint could only be used once, making it extremely rare. Its effects included significantly shortening crop growth cycles without any side effects, making it the perfect tool for someone who truly loved farming. After hearing this, Lin Fong could no longer ignore the offer. Seeing his reaction, the man smirked and stepped closer, mockingly asking if the hillbilly was done thinking yet and whether he dared to accept the bet. At the same time, unseen by Lin Fong, messages were flashing on the man's communicator. Someone reported that Lin Fong had come out of the dungeon. Another message came back telling him to stall Lin Fong at all costs. When the man asked what to do if Lin Fong ignored him, the reply was clear: use resources to bait him. Put the lamp of nature blueprint on the line. The man hesitated for a moment, noting that the blueprint was the foundation of his family's rise, but eventually agreed to go through with it. Meanwhile, Lin Fong was thinking things through carefully. He knew that his necromancer abilities could not be exposed. However, if it was just a speedrun with a supervising teacher, he figured he could hide most of it without too much trouble. More importantly, the lamp of nature was simply too valuable to pass up. For what he planned to do next, it was a perfect fit, one that would greatly accelerate his progress. With that thought in mind, his decision was already made. Lin Fong finally nodded and said that he accepted. The other guy immediately burst out laughing, saying that this was perfect. He added that with a teacher supervising, Lin Fong would be exposed very soon. Soon after, they entered the level 10 dungeon, Gloom Forest, through the portal. As they stepped inside, the supervising teacher turned to Lin Fong and asked how he had managed to clear the dungeon earlier. Lin Fong calmly replied that he would simply show his strength. As he spoke, a swirling green aura began spreading from his hands. He then called out for his farm hands to come forth. In the next instant, numerous figures appeared behind him. They were all summons, and the scene was undeniably shocking. The teacher was slightly stunned. The summoning speed was incredibly fast, and the quality of the summoned troops looked extremely high. From the teacher's perspective, this was a perfect opportunity to observe exactly how Lin Fong had managed to solo clear the dungeon. Even he couldn't help feeling excited as the dense green aura filled the surroundings and plant-based summons continued forming one after another. Then Lin Fong gave a simple command, telling them to attack with full force. Almost immediately, monsters began rushing toward them. The plant summons surged forward and unleashed their power, crushing the incoming wolves one after another. Green explosions erupted everywhere as the monsters were completely wiped out. The scale of destruction was overwhelming, yet it conveniently helped Lin Fong keep his true secrets hidden. The summons didn't stop there. They continued advancing, unleashing even more magic and leaving no monsters alive in their wake. Seeing this, the teacher couldn't hide his shock. He realized that it had taken less than a minute to completely wipe out a Cobalt patrol squad of the same level. The power on display was terrifying. He couldn't help but wonder if this was the result of a special class. Lin Fong then calmly reported that the Cobalt patrol squad had been cleared, and that they were moving on to the boss room. As they advanced deeper, a dark aura began spreading through the forest. From within it, an even more sinister presence emerged, roaring as it appeared. Lin Fong remained calm and gave another order, telling Zia to raise the shield and advance while the others followed closely behind. He added that if any kobolds attempted to flank them, they were to strike without mercy. Once again, green energy surged forward in powerful waves, repeatedly obliterating the monsters in their path. When the boss monster finally charged in with a massive attack, the summons braced themselves. Since they were formed from aura, the damage they took was minimal. They immediately counterattacked. The combined strike sent the monster flying backward, crashing into the surroundings and filling the area with debris, smoke, and chaos. The teacher was completely shaken. Inside his mind, he felt that someone with this level of combat potential absolutely had to be reported to the principal immediately. Not a single second could be wasted. The boss monster lay smashed into the ground as green aura continued to surge around Lin Fong. Slowly, the aura began to fade. but the monster remained motionless. The dungeon was clearly about to enter the reward phase, yet the teacher was still struggling to process what he had just witnessed. Lin Fong calmly asked whether he had proven himself now. The teacher answered without hesitation, saying that there was no doubt about it. Lin Fong had more than proven himself. After that, they began heading back. As they walked, the teacher noticed that Lin Fong was not following out of the dungeon, and asked whether he was leaving. Lin Fong replied that having the teacher verify things was already enough. He added that the scenery inside the dungeon was actually quite nice, and that he wanted to look around a bit more. The teacher nodded, waved, and said that he would head out first. He reminded Lin Fong that the dungeon would reset half an hour after being cleared, and told him to keep an eye on the time. As soon as the teacher disappeared through the portal, Lin Fong turned and walked straight toward the fallen boss. He thought about how his level hadn't been high enough earlier, then decided to try again. Dark energy gathered as he activated his ability once more. With a firm command, he ordered the monster to rise. From the shadows, the same boss slowly stood back up, now reborn under his control. Lin Fong had gained a new and extremely powerful summon. Soon after, Lin Fong exited the dungeon. At the entrance, the students who had been doubting him earlier stared in shock. One of them exclaimed that the fierce guy was finally out. Another nervously admitted that he had mocked Lin Fong before, and wondered whether Lin Fong might hold a grudge. Someone else quickly suggested that they all leave together. None of them wanted to stay any longer. The last thing they wanted was to provoke someone like him. The teacher then stepped forward and officially announced that, in the name of Extraordinary Academy, Lin Fong had proven himself. He handed over the rewards and compensation that rightfully belonged to him. As Lin Fong accepted the bag and the blueprint, a faintly smug expression appeared on his face. He wanted everyone watching to understand one thing clearly. This was not someone they should mess with. Inside, he felt genuinely satisfied. Vera then explained to him that after the administrator came out to testify, the guy who had challenged him realized he was in the wrong, dropped the items, and ran off without another word. Lin Fong glanced at the rewards and immediately focused on what mattered most to him. He cheerfully remarked that with fertilizer secured, a full harvest was guaranteed. Before leaving, the teacher added that Lin Fong might also want a recording stone containing footage of the student's performance inside the dungeon. A loud, heavy impact echoed as someone threw a powerful punch straight into a punching bag. The scene shifted to Sun Willow Academy, inside Haru's room. Haru was clearly in a terrible mood. As he continued striking the bag, he kept thinking about Lin Fong, calling him a lowly farmer who had humiliated him again and again. He realized that brute force wouldn't work, and Academy rules couldn't touch Lin Fong either. No matter how he thought about it, neither path would solve the problem. After thinking hard for a long while, an idea finally struck him. He suddenly remembered that Lin Fong was only relying on his nature magic and summons to show off. With that thought in mind, he immediately ordered a letter to be sent to the front lines to his uncle, the Count. As the letter was taken away, Haru added another instruction, telling the messenger to have the Nature Department mentors currently rotating on the battlefield return to the academy as soon as possible. The person delivering the letter hesitated and asked if Haru was planning to use the Nature Department mentors to suppress Lin Fong. Haru answered without hesitation, saying that was exactly the plan. He thought that those old mentors valued purity and strict rules of nature magic above everything else. If they were the ones dealing with Lin Fong, he wanted to see whether Lin Fong could still act so arrogantly. At the same time, back at Extraordinary Academy, the scene shifted to Vera's room. She was repeatedly watching the dungeon recording, unable to look away. As she studied it, she muttered to herself that Lin Fong was simply a monster. In her eyes, his understanding of nature's power had already become instinctual, something far beyond normal comprehension. She briefly considered waiting until tomorrow, but immediately rejected the idea. Instead, she decided to write a letter right away to notify those same old mentors to return as soon as possible. She felt they couldn't afford to waste any more time. The worst possible outcome would be losing Lin Fong to another faction, and she was determined to keep him on their side. Without hesitation, she sent the letter off, watching as it flew away into the distance. As she looked up at the sky, admiring the drifting clouds, a faint smile appeared on her face. She calmly thought that if those old geezers didn't hurry back, their lifetime achievement honors were about to slip right through their fingers. For several days in a row, Lin Fong lived inside the dungeon. He faced countless beasts, but none of them posed any real threat. He dealt with them effortlessly. One beast fell after another, and Lin Fong stood beside the corpse, calmly scanning his surroundings as the smoke slowly dissipated. Then notifications began to appear. 10 minutes 28 seconds, 10 minutes 29 seconds, 10 minutes 30 seconds, 10 meters 31 seconds, 10 minutes 32 seconds. He was constantly breaking his own records. When Lin Fong finally exited the dungeon, the people outside immediately started commenting. One person said that he had solo cleared it again and was still this fast, treating the dungeon like his own backyard. Another remarked that he was at it again and wondered how many runs he had done today. Someone else said they hadn't bothered counting anymore and joked that the guy was just insane. Another person scoffed and told everyone to disperse, saying it was boring and that watching him grind dungeons wasn't as entertaining as watching others farm. Lin Fong walked forward, took out his item box and said that he was here to exchange for fertilizer. Brother Chin looked at him and said that student Lin Feng's accumulated credits were already enough to apply for promotion. He added that staying in the lower academy held little meaning for him and suggested that he apply for promotion to the upper academy. Lin Fong thought about it briefly, then said he wanted to be promoted to the upper academy. Chun then explained that the extraordinary academy was divided into upper and lower academies. The lower academy focused on cultivating basic talent, like the current Storm Academy, while Sunhye Academy was where elites from all lower academies gathered and was known as the upper academy. He added that after entering Sunhye Academy, the rewards available for exchange, both in quality and variety, far surpassed what the lower academy could offer. He said that this was exactly where a genius like Lin Fong belonged. Lin Fong silently repeated Sunhye Academy, the upper academy, in his mind. After thinking it through, he said that he understood and thanked the teacher. Later, Lin Fong entered the academy mission hall and stated that he was here to apply for promotion to Sunhye Academy. The receptionist asked for his name, department, and credit voucher. Lin Fong handed over his card, and his status immediately appeared. Lin Fong Nature Department. Affiliated with Storm Academy, current credits 30,135. Everyone present was stunned. One person muttered that he actually had over 30,000 credits. Another said that if he remembered correctly, Lin Fong was the big shot who had crazily grinded Gloom Forest. Someone else wondered just how many times he must have cleared Gloom Forest to earn that many credits. The receptionist verified the credits and handed Lin Fong his promotion mission scroll. As she passed it to him, she explained that once he completed the task and passed the review, he would officially become a member of Sunhye Academy. Lin Fong asked whether he would be able to exchange for gold-grade supplies after promoting. The lady standing nearby nodded and explained that since he was currently affiliated with Storm Academy, he could only exchange credits for bronze to silver-grade supplies. After promotion, however, he would be able to exchange for gold to platinum-grade rare supplies. Lin Fong thanked her and walked away as everyone continued staring at him. As he left, he mentioned that he was heading to the defensive line area outside the city to look for something. He added that the location was close to the manor, so it shouldn't be difficult, but before that, he needed to pick something up. While walking, a senior stopped him and warned that although the Lamp of Nature was only silver grade, its effects were not inferior to gold grade items at all. He reminded Lin Fong to maintain it properly and to be extremely careful not to let it be tainted by necrotic energy. Lin Fong assured him that he would and thanked the senior. Afterward, Lin Fong looked around and continued forward. In his mind, he thought that although the description said the Lamp of Nature could not be tainted by necrotic energy, he couldn't shake the strong urge to try it anyway. He activated the lamp and summoned his necrotic beings, causing the lamp to transform. Lin Fong realized that it had directly changed from a nature-type item into an undead-type one. As he continued experimenting, a massive amount of aura and energy spread outward. He sat there, observing carefully. After some time passed, he felt relieved that the item was sentient. He realized that by using nature-type energy, it could be reverted back into the Lamp of Nature. Otherwise, he would have had no way to explain it. Later, outside the city at Lin Fang's farm, he placed the lamp above the fields. Soon after, crops began to grow at an astonishing rate. Lin Fang couldn't help but think that the power of the Lamp of Nature was truly terrifying. Even on its first use, it produced such results. He thought that the Extraordinary Academy would surely have even more incredible items, and that he needed to complete his Upper Academy promotion mission as quickly as possible. With that in mind, he headed out, leaving his beings busy with their work. A short while later, the words "periphery of the abandoned watchtower" came into view. Lin Fang realized this was the mission location. Since it was a search mission with low visibility, he decided to proceed cautiously. The air felt fresh, and it seemed someone had been here not long ago. As he looked around, he noticed numerous footprints, While examining them, he wondered who would come to a place like this. Suddenly, he sensed something and immediately looked up. Several people were nearby. One urged the others to hurry, saying that the young master had ordered them to take the item before Lin Feng arrived and make his mission fail. Another laughed and claimed that he had found it. A third told him to keep his voice down, warning that the guy named Lin could show up at any moment. The other scoffed and said there was nothing to fear, adding that they would just burn it with fire-type magic if needed. As he spoke, he threw the book away, saying that once the item was destroyed, Lin Feng's mission would fail as well. However, the book flew straight into Lin Feng's hand. Lin Feng calmly said that in that case he should thank them. The group froze in terror, completely unprepared for this outcome. One of them cursed and blamed the other, saying it was all his fault. He even struck him and yelled for him to snatch the item back immediately. Both of them gathered aura in their hands and rushed straight at Lin Feng. Lin Feng instantly responded, gathering green aura of his own. In the blink of an eye, spikes and vines burst from the ground at incredible speed, tightly binding the two attackers. They were dragged directly in front of Lin Feng. Lin Feng asked whether they planned to give him an explanation. He even laughed, knowing that once restrained like this, there was nothing they could do. Later, at dusk outside the city farm, Lin Feng thought about Haru. He hadn't expected it to be Haru again. He realized that if this continued, he would be exposed sooner or later and needed to find a solution. At that moment, he noticed one of his necrotic summons holding a red flag and tinkering with it for quite some time. Many of the other summons were nearby, working diligently. Lin Feng watched them for a moment, then smiled and said that it was fully automated and genuinely impressive. Meanwhile, in Haru's room, one of his men reported that they had sent people to search the watchtower. They hadn't found the two men, but traces left by their own people were discovered, making it highly likely that they were already done for. Hearing this, Haru flew into a rage. He slammed his fist into the wall and cursed them as trash, yelling that they couldn't even handle such a small matter. He questioned why he even kept them around or paid them if they were so useless. His anger toward Lin Feng burned even hotter. In his mind, Haru thought that Lin Feng had actually dared to take down his people. He ordered them to contact Shadow Eclipse, telling them to offer the highest price and buy Lin Feng's life. He continued thinking that Lin Feng must have been the one who took Tuka, and that it was time for him to pay. At the Academy Mission Hall, an announcement was made congratulating student Lin Feng on officially becoming a member of Sunhei Academy, expressing hope that Lin Feng would always walk the path of seeking truth. He was handed his new uniform and student nameplate. After receiving everything, Lin Feng thought that with the promotion, he could grind even more credits and obtain more planting supplies. Later, at the level 10 Ding Gloom Forest entrance, Lin Feng handed over his nameplate and requested a solo dungeon entry. The attendant shook his head and said it was no longer possible. Lin Feng asked what was wrong, noting that it had been allowed before. The attendant explained that according to Academy regulations, in order to reserve enough promotion resources and opportunities for lower house students, upper house students were prohibited from challenging level 10 and below low-level dungeons. After hearing this, Lin Feng is both shocked and nervous. He can't believe it, and immediately asks why he can no longer grind dungeons, saying that he had planned to grind a bit more before heading back. As Lin Feng leaves, the man at the entrance thinks to himself that it's a good thing Lin Feng finally left, because if he had stayed any longer, the warehouse would have been completely emptied by that kid. Lin Feng realizes that his most efficient way of grinding supplies is now gone. He starts thinking about what to do next. Just then, someone approaches him and says that he must be the newly promoted junior brother, Lenong. He introduces himself as Ron and explains that after seeing Lin Feng wandering around, he figured Lin Feng might be having trouble finding a suitable mission. Ron adds that their squad has accepted a dangerous collection mission and is currently short one member. Lin Feng finds Ron's appearance a little too coincidental. Ron then asks if he's interested in joining, saying it's a good opportunity to get familiar with the difficulty of upper house dungeons. Lin Feng thinks that he really does need credits to exchange for supplies, and also needs to understand how strict Sunhei Academy truly is. He reasons that if it's just a collection mission, it shouldn't be too problematic. So he agrees and says he'll join them. Ron responds happily and says they should head out immediately. When they arrive at the dungeon entrance, two people are already waiting. Ron introduces them, saying one is the cold-faced Juve and the other is the sore-faced Carter. Ron explains that their objective is to collect moonlight grass deep within the forest. The mission requires 10 stalks, and according to their intelligence, night elves are patrolling the area. He instructs everyone to avoid combat if possible and focus on gathering. Deep inside the shadow woods, They move together and soon discover a patch of moonlight grass. One of them tells the others not to fight over, saying this is exactly what they came for and that he didn't expect the mission to go so smoothly. However, while they are carelessly collecting the grass, dust suddenly rises around them. Flying insect-type monsters swarm in from behind and launch an attack. Ron immediately warns that something is wrong and shouts that it's a night elf patrol squad, telling everyone to prepare for battle. The night elves begin attacking with sticky substances, but Ron manages to deflect the material back at them. He orders everyone to take their positions and tells Lin Fong to use nature magic to harass the enemies, explaining that night elves despise nature magic. Lin Fong responds at once, saying he understands. He releases his nature magic, sending vines spreading in every direction. The vines quickly seize the night elves, catching them completely off guard. They clearly hadn't expected such a method to restrain them. Once several are bound, Lin Fong pulls them together and ties them into a tight knot. Ron and the others immediately attack the remaining night elves, along with those trapped in the knot. After fighting for a while, Ron suddenly shouts that it's bad news and says the enemies are calling for reinforcements. He calls out to Carter and Ube. Ube responds that it's time to start, and Carter acknowledges it as well. Carter begins preparing another type of special magic. The ground suddenly splits open, causing several monsters to fall into the cracks. However, Lin Fong is also put in danger. As the ground fractures unpredictably, he loses his footing and nearly falls, barely managing to grab onto a ledge. He calls out in frustration. Ron then apologizes, saying he's very sorry, junior brother Lin Fong. He explains that this is a skill Carter only recently learned and that Carter isn't very proficient yet, which is why it accidentally affected Lin Fong. Seeing Ron's attitude and how the others deliberately place him in danger, Lin Fong asks whether they have any intention of saving him. Ron laughs and says it's not that they won't save him, but that the newly promoted junior brother of the upper house was too headstrong and insisted on challenging elite-level monsters alone. Ron declares that in the end, Lin Fong tragically sacrificed himself, and there was nothing they could do. Lin Fong makes a strange expression and asks whether they aren't worried about being exposed for murdering an academy student. Ron explains that Sunhei Academy student nameplates undergo special processing and are capable of recording powerful magical energy. He says that after Lin Fong dies, they'll take his nameplate and use it to record the elite monster's magic. Uninterested in their rambling, Lin Fong asks one final question, wondering if there is truly no other way for outsiders to know what really happened here. Ron confidently replies that they've done this many times and tells him to trust their professional standards. Lin Fong says he understands. Then he releases his grip on the ledge and appears to fall into the abyss before their eyes. Ron comments that since Lin Fong knew he couldn't resist, he chose to jump down voluntarily to give himself a quick death. But suddenly, Ron senses something is wrong. At the same moment, Lin Fang's voice asks whether they are ready as well. Lin Fong appears above them instead of below, right where they least expect him. Everyone is utterly stunned. Lin Fong calmly tells them to face his legion. Ron immediately panics, repeatedly muttering that this is bad. At the same time, Lin Fong summons his powerful undead minions. Now true panic sets in. They never imagined such an outcome. To them, Lin Fong is an even greater monster than they are. Some of the undead even form a strange, beautiful heart shape before launching their attack. Ron screams in disbelief, shouting that Lin Fong is a necromancer and that this is impossible. Lin Fong coldly asks if this is Ron's final testament. Ron hurriedly tries to negotiate, calling Lin Fong junior brother and saying they can talk this out. He claims there was never any real conflict between them and admits that everything was arranged by Haru. He begs Lin Fong to spare them, saying they know they were wrong. Lin Fong replies that they don't know they were wrong, they only know that they're about to die. Ron desperately adds that Haru always believed Lin Fong killed Tuka and claims he can testify against Haru. Lin Fong shows no interest. He steps forward, squats down, and calmly asks who Tuka is. At first, Ron refuses to answer and turns his head away. Lin Fong then says to forget it, that it doesn't matter, and orders his minions to bury them. A massive surge of aura erupts, and soon everyone is lying motionless on the ground. Even then, Ron curses Lin Fong, saying he hopes Lin Fong dies a miserable death. Lin Fong replies that Ron's good days are just beginning. He orders Ron to rise, and all of them resurrect as undead minions. Lin Fong reflects on whether undead transformed from humanoid creatures naturally possess higher intelligence than other undead. He realizes this may be due to the Night Elves' magic from earlier. He decides he doesn't need to personally deal with the aftermath, but since people have died, It's best to return and report the incident. With that, he heads toward the portal to leave. However, something feels wrong. Lin Fong realizes he can't exit. Confused, he stares at the portal until a notification appears, stating that the special item Regret of the Past has taken effect. It explains that before the dungeon is fully cleared, the exit cannot be opened, and that within this dungeon, all of his attributes will be increased to 200%. Suddenly, black energy erupts around him as another presence emerges. Lin Fong is shocked by what he sees. Before him stands a massive creature, a gigantic horse fused with a towering humanoid figure. As Lin Fong watches the new figure preparing a massive attack, he suddenly feels that something serious is about to go down. He immediately summons his undead, thinking it won't be that hard to deal with, and gives the order to attack. His undead charge forward at incredible speed, just as the horse-like figure prepares its weapon. However, the undead are slightly faster and strike first. They deliver one powerful blow after another. The horse-mounted figure struggles to fight back. Soon, the horse becomes frightened, causing the rider to fall. The undead immediately follow up with another flurry of attacks, continuously damaging the fallen figure. Lin Fong casually eats a banana while observing the battle. He thinks that the undead seem to possess more instinct this time and are even capable of coordinating with each other. Still, it feels like something is missing. As the attacks keep raining down, the fallen figure can't believe what's happening. He asks why Lin Fong is able to use the power of death. Lin Fong watches silently at first, then laughs and smiles, saying that he wouldn't understand. Lin Fong then orders them to bury him. The undead intensify their assault, and the enemy finally collapses. Another massive area-wide attack follows. A status window appears showing that the area is clear and progress has reached 50%. Lin Fong comments that it is actually a dual boss system dungeon and realizes he has to continue deeper inside. At the Gloom Forest core area, massive weed-like mushrooms grow everywhere, even wrapping around the trees. Lin Fong enjoys the scenery as he moves forward. But suddenly, he senses something wrong. A huge aura erupts as a hidden area reveals itself. From within it, another figure emerges, surrounded by an overwhelming aura. The figure questions why Lin Fong has set foot in this holy land. Lin Fong responds by asking if the figure can speak human language, adding that if not, he'll start the fight. The figure is revealed as Guardian, Shivius, level 18. She remains silent for a moment, only raising her aura until the entire area is engulfed in red energy. A status window appears in front of Lin Fong, stating that he has entered the combat phase. It explains that the Spore Domain effect is active, causing all non-shadow type units to take 4 erosion damage every 3 seconds, with the decay effect stacking. It also notes that because Lin Fong has the stacked effect Regret of the Past, his undead units regenerate 1 mana per second. Feeling confident, Lin Fong says that this means the undead he summons in this dungeon can maintain themselves without consuming his mana. Lin Fong laughs and says that Regret of the Past is truly a good thing. He then summons his undead and orders them to crush everything. Another huge battle breaks out. Later, in a different area, a man thinks to himself that it's fine even if Ron and the others couldn't beat Lin Fong because the real final boss is still waiting. He thinks that although Regret of the Past increases all attributes, its true function is actually to lock the dungeon. With that kind of boss existing, even if all attributes were increased by 200% or even 400%, it would still be impossible to defeat it. Thinking about this, he laughs to himself, feeling delighted as just imagining it brings him joy. Back on Lin Fong's side, a massive explosion has just occurred. Smoke fills the area as one of the undead walks out, dragging the defeated enemy along. Lin Fong calmly eats another banana while watching the enemy being pulled toward him. The enemy is unable to speak, completely shocked and stunned. She finally asks why Lin Fong betrayed them. Lin Fong says nothing. Because of the self-edited control, he doesn't even know if she is talking to him. She then angrily accuses him of destroying her hatchery and vows revenge, but before she can finish, she is knocked unconscious. Another explosion erupts as an overwhelming surge of power spreads out. A status window appears announcing that the Gloom Forest dungeon has been cleared. The clear time is 2 hours and 17 minutes, setting a new record. The evaluation is A, and reward calculation begins. Lin Fong eats yet another banana and thinks that it's not bad at all, feeling that he has grown stronger. Soon, a huge egg-like object appears in front of him. Lin Fong is confused and wonders what it is. A notification then appears identifying it as the embryo of the Chthonic Demon, a mythical-grade item in an inactive state. The description explains that it is a life seed left behind after the fall of an ancient Chthonic demon, requiring specific conditions to hatch. Its current status is dormant, with a strong death aura detected and an affinity of 30%. As Lin Fong examines it closely, he thinks about this black egg hatchery and wonders what it really is. He then uses his storage ring to store it away entirely. After that, an exit opens, allowing him to leave immediately. However, before leaving, Lin Fong looks around one last time at the Lady Demon's body. He thinks that converting a level 18 boss into an undead would consume a lot of power, but once converted, it should be at least on the same level as Xia. With that thought, he gives the command to arise. Soon, the Lady Demon rises and becomes part of his undead legion. She then declares that she is the Death Executioner. After hearing this, Lin Fong is quite shocked. He says that it can actually speak and then asks if it can talk. She responds again, saying she is the Death Executioner. Lin Fong says, yeah, I know that already, and tries to clarify what he means, but she once again repeats that she is the Death Executioner. Lin Fong goes quiet for a moment, completely confused. Then she repeats the same words yet again, saying, I am the Death Executioner. Lin Fong finally gives up and tells her to forget it and stop talking, saying he doesn't want to hear anything else. Later, outside the Gloom Forest. Dungeon entrance. Lin Fong steps out of the portal. Guards and staff members are already gathered there. One of them is extremely shocked and says this is impossible. Another asks how Lin Fong could solo clear Gloom Forest. Someone else adds that this is a dungeon where even a 5-man squad often wipes. Another staff member steps forward and asks Lin Fong why he came out alone and where students Ron, Carter, and Ur are. Lin Fong explains that they encountered a massive night elf attack while gathering moonlight grass and unfortunately got separated. He says he barely managed to escape deeper into the dungeon, accidentally triggered the boss fight, and narrowly survived to clear it and come out. As for the three of them, he says it doesn't bode well. The staff members discuss among themselves and conclude that it does match the magical power characteristics of night elves. One of them clenches his fists in frustration and asks Lin Fong if he encountered any unexpected situations after entering the dungeon. Lin Fong replies that after entering, he gained an effect called regret of the past. The staff member is shocked and immediately asks if Lin Fong has made any enemies recently. Nearby, another person at the dungeon entrance watches in disbelief, thinking that this is impossible and wondering how Lin Fong could solo clear the dungeon boss, something no single person should be able to achieve. Lin Fong notices him from afar and tries to stay out of sight, but his height ends up giving him away anyway. Lin Fong then says that as for enemies, he doesn't really know since he just got promoted to Sunhee Academy. The staff member acknowledges this and says they will investigate the matter carefully and ensure justice for him. Lin Fong bows slightly and thanks the mentor, saying he's counting on them to handle this matter. Meanwhile, the other guy still can't believe what just happened. As Lin Fong turns to leave, he quietly thinks about how he's going to send his undead after the one who tried to take him down. After taking a closer look, Lin Fong thought to himself that the object had been perfectly fine outside the dungeon just moments ago. But now that they were back at the farm, this embryo had suddenly become restless. He recalled Xavier's dying words and wondered if this thing had been placed in the dungeon intentionally to be nurtured. He noticed something even stranger. The embryo could actually be influenced by both of his magical powers simultaneously. Logically speaking, undead magic and nature magic shouldn't be able to coexist. So why was this happening? He wondered if the embryo was like him, capable of housing two opposing types of magic within a single body. But then he reminded himself that he was human. This embryo, on the other hand, clearly looked like something created by the demon clan. He concluded there was only one way to find out. He changed into a fresh set of clothes and headed straight for the principal's office. After he knocked, a voice from inside told him to enter. The man inside noticed him and remarked that student Lin Fong hadn't rested yet, even at this late hour. Lin Fong showed him the embryo, admitting that it was hard to explain and asking the principal to take a look directly. The principal examined it carefully and asked where Lin Fong had found it. Lin Fong explained that it was inside the Shadowwoods dungeon and had dropped after he killed the final boss. At first, he thought it was just a standard drop item, but something felt off. The principal immediately recognized it, declaring there could be no mistake, it was the embryo of a chthonic demon. He realized that the demon clan had actually managed to bypass their detection systems and enter the dungeon directly to cultivate such a thing. Lin Fong repeated the term chthonic demon in surprise, and the principal began to explain. He stated that a chthonic demon is a unit of the demon clan that uses humans as food. By preying on humans, they gain immense strength, and some can even cross space itself. He continued, noting that conventionally, only a Type 4 Bloodcaven Lord is capable of this. These chthonic demons, having gained the power to cross space, use dungeon mechanics to plant seeds or embryos. They rely on the battles, deaths, and magical fluctuations of adventurers as nutrients to incubate silently. Once the embryo matures, it breaks through the dungeon and descends into reality. The principal added that this particular embryo had only just entered its growth phase. If it had remained inside the dungeon absorbing nutrients, it would have hatched within half a year at most. After hatching, it would have become an extremely high-level chthonic demon. If it had caused chaos within the academy, the consequences would have been unimaginable. However, the principal admitted that what puzzled him most was that this kind of embryo usually hides extremely deep and won't reveal itself unless there is a similar aura nearby. He then asked Lin Fong if he understood the implication. Lin Fong caught the drift immediately and began to panic. However, the principal told him to relax, assuring him he was only teasing. He explained that Lin Fong had done a great service by handing over the embryo. Both logically and emotionally, the principal had no intention of doing anything to him. He added that everyone has secrets, and the academy respects that, as long as Lin Fong does not harm the school or trample on the moral bottom line of humanity. The academy was willing to give geniuses the space they needed to grow. The principal then said he required only one promise. No matter what power Lin Fong possessed, he must remember that he is a student of Sunhei Academy and a member of the human faction. Lin Fong bowed slightly, promising to keep that in mind. The principal patted him on the shoulder, saying, "Good job." After that, he produced an item and explained that it was a territory banner. It was both a reward for handing over the embryo and an investment in Lin Fong's potential. He explained that once planted, Lin Fong could unfold a primary territory barrier with a radius of 500 meters, which could even achieve a certain degree of terrain modification. Lin Fong became visibly cheerful upon seeing this. He remarked that such rich powers of law were exactly what his farm needed. The principal then told him that if there was nothing else, he should go back and rest. He would send someone to handle the matter. Lin Fong responded respectfully that he understood. Before Lin Fong left, however, the principal added one more thing. He mentioned that there would be a freshman exchange meeting in the academy auditorium in 3 days and suggested Lin Fong go meet some peers. He also noted that a mentor from the nature department named Sue had submitted a very interesting topic before heading to the front line for duty, something about plant cultivation and hybridization. The term hybridization breeding immediately caught Lin Fong's attention. As he thought about it, he realized that previously he had simply been gluing undead and plants together. But what if he thoroughly hybridized them instead? Later, back at the farm, he planted the territory banner and observed the surroundings. He noted that after using the banner, the concentration of nature magic in the area was clearly rising. However, the issue of combining the undead and hybridization still felt very difficult to solve. Just then, he sensed something and looked around, wondering if something had happened on Savius's side. Elsewhere, a worn-out man muttered to himself that the pressure was becoming too much. He couldn't even deal with a brat who had just been promoted. He felt he couldn't wait any longer. He worried that investigators at Sunhei Academy had already found clues. If they discovered that Tuka had been taken down by him, it would cause huge trouble. Later, he entered a secret room. Deep below stood a massive demon. Standing before it, he performed a ritual and called out Haru's name. The demon responded, asking why Haru had disturbed him when he had explicitly said not to come unless it was urgent. Haru immediately knelt and prayed, addressing him as the Great Gladiosa and asking for guidance. He explained that an anomaly named Lin Fong was destroying his sowing plans and asked how he should eliminate him. The demon snorted, calling Lin Fong an anomaly and stating that those who delusionally want to change fate will eventually be punished by it. He declared that he would send someone to deal with him. Haru hurriedly thanked the Great Gladiosa and asked him to make it quick, admitting his anxiety. The demon suddenly flew into a rage, roaring at Haru not to order him around like an ant. Haru was blasted backward, sent flying by the massive impact. After crashing down, Haru grit his teeth in frustration, blaming Lin Fong for everything. Later, at the freshman exchange meeting in the academy auditorium, a large crowd had gathered. Lin Fong was present, sitting quietly. He complained internally that this was boring and that he shouldn't have listened to the principal's nonsense. He thought that the time spent at this party would have been better used researching hybridization back at the farm. Even so, he had to admit the food actually tasted pretty good. Suddenly, a guy approached him and called out to student Lin Fong. Lin Fong was slightly surprised that someone had come to talk to him. The guy excitedly said he heard Lin Fong had solo cleared the Shadow Territory dungeon and that it was amazing, asking if he could get some advice. Lin Fong immediately felt that something was off. He noted that everyone else had been avoiding him, yet this person had approached him voluntarily. Lin Fong apologized, claiming he didn't want to talk about it because 3 seniors had died in that dungeon. He even pretended to tear up. The other guy quickly apologized, saying he was sorry for bringing up painful memories and would ask another time. However, as he walked away, the stranger thought to himself that this was the person Lord Gulaudiosa asked him to deal with, and he didn't look like much. Meanwhile, Lin Fong silently watched him leave without saying a word. Elsewhere, Haru lay back, muttering that the Iron Lion Duke, the Nature Department mentor, and Gulaudiosa had all been notified. Even so, he still felt a faint uneasiness in his heart. The feeling grew stronger, and he suddenly shouted, "Who is there?" A strange figure stepped forward. It was Lin Fong, accompanied by one of his undead warriors. Lin Fong calmly asked what number this was. Haru replied that it was 1. Lin Fong nodded and said, "Correct." Then he threw a punch straight into Haru's face, saying he had tolerated him for a long time. It was his reward punch, and he had plenty more on his mind that he wanted to try out. Haru was thrown back hard, smashing into the ground as purple energy sparked violently around him. Lin Fong stood there as a dark flame burned in his hand. Injured, Haru lifted his head and stared at Lin Fong, anger flashing in his eyes. As he struggled to get up, his body trembled with the same purple light. Lin Fong watched him without moving. Haru pushed himself up on one arm and demanded to know how Lin Fong had gotten in. Lin Fong stepped forward with his undead floating behind him. He asked Haru if the events in the Gloom Forest dungeon were done by him. Hearing that, Haru clenched his teeth and shook with anger. Purple sparks flickered across his body as he shouted, asking how Lin Fong dared to hit him. Haru's body trembled as dark purple energy wrapped around him. His muscles bulged, veins lit with demonic light, and his fingers curled like claws. In front of him, Lin Fong stood calmly, his summoned undead glowing with the same kind of energy. Haru then bent forward, his back cracking as more energy surged out. Flames of purple rose around him, twisting like living shadows while markings spread across his skin. He raised his head and, with red glowing eyes, used his Demon Clan forbidden technique, flesh sacrifice. His body transformed further, ears sharpening, energy spreading and power overflowing from every limb. He stood tall in his new demonic form, surrounded by swirling flames of purple and black. Seeing that, Lin Fong narrowed his eyes. He recognized the technique immediately and asked sharply if Haru was a spy for the Demon Clan. Hearing Lin Fong call him demonized, Haru only laughed. He declared that he was a devout believer of Gulaudiosa. Hearing this, Lin Fong grew serious. Realizing that Haru was connected to the 7th Demon King, Gulaudiosa, Haru glared fiercely. With purple flames twisting around his body, he shouted with rage, demanding how Lin Fong dared to speak his lord's name so casually. Without warning, he lunged forward, darkness wrapped around his arms as he roared, telling Lin Fong to die. But Lin Fong stood his ground, his undead floating beside him and coming forward, surrounded by swirling violet energy. As Haru charged at full speed to attack, Lin Feng's undead responded instantly. She swung her glowing scythe upward, releasing a crescent slash of bright purple light that blocked Haru's attack. But Haru didn't back down and released more demonic energy, causing the female undead scythe to start cracking. The next second, purple fire erupted from Haru's hand and fell on the female undead scythe, shattering it instantly. The female undead looked at her weapon, which was completely destroyed. Haru's corrosive power was extremely strong. Lin Feng watched her with a serious face. In his mind, he admitted that he had only wanted to test Haru a little, but now things had gotten bad. The female undead created and raised her huge scythe again, releasing huge amounts of necro energy to attack Haru. As that energy hit Haru, he let out a loud roar. Now blue and purple flames burst from his body as he spread his arms wide. He shouted that he had been thinking about how to deal with Lin Feng, but he never expected Lin Feng to walk right into his hands. Seeing Haru unleash more and more energy, Lin Feng also got ready to release his energy as he made up his mind. In his thoughts, he decided that the only way now was to use Haru's distraction and finish the fight as quickly as possible. Haru, covered in blue flames, stood in front of Lin Feng. Seeing that, Lin Feng hid his hand behind him and used his summoning skill. The next second, several shadowy undead appeared behind Lin Feng. They all had sharp ears, dark bodies, and strange glowing flames. They stood like an army at his side, making his presence even more dangerous. Seeing that, Haru was shocked. He immediately recognized that Linfeng was using undead magic. His face twisted with anger as he shouted that Linfeng really was problematic. Tears streamed down Haru's face as he said the Tuka's sacrifice was not wasted because they had discovered a human genius. While he was lost in thought, one of Linfeng's undead stepped forward and attacked Haru with its huge spear. It moved fast and struck, sending its glowing spear straight toward Haru. That sharp purple spear of energy pierced Haru's chest. Haru fell to the ground before he could understand anything. His body was bruised, but his eyes still burned fiercely. From the shadows ahead, Linfeng's cold voice questioned him if he was the one who killed Tuka. Haru clenched his teeth. Dark energy wrapped around his limbs as he placed a hand on his chest. His voice trembled with ritualistic intensity as he began chanting that with blood as the guide and the soul as the bridge, he welcomed the master's will to descend upon his body. Immediately, black veins pulsed across Haru's skin and his eyes glowed red. A violent surge of purple fire burst outward and a magic circle lit up beneath him, filling the room with swirling patterns. Haru told Linfeng to tremble and welcome the descent of the Demon King. He announced his name, Galadius. As he said that, a towering figure of shadow and horns appeared above him, surrounded by floating spheres and blazing violet flames. Haru knelt before him. Lowering his head, he addressed the being reverently as Lord Galadius. But before Haru could continue, Galadius punched him, asking how a mere ant dared to call his true name. Injured, Haru sat on the floor, purple flames drifting around him. He looked up with confusion and called him Lord. In front of him, Linfeng stood calmly, and behind him, all of his powerful undead appeared, their glowing forms filling the room. Haru pointed at him and asked his lord to kill him. Linfeng's mage undead came forward and raised his hand, gathering bright purple energy. He attacked the Demon King with an energy beam. Demon King Galadius was surprised to see that Linfeng was a necromancer. He immediately realized that Kui had already been defeated. He then raised his shield, which came out of the ground, to block Linfeng's mage undead's energy beam. But this made Demon King Galadius realize that his summoner was simply too weak, too frail, and because of that, his mana couldn't maintain the defensive formation. Thinking that, he raised his hand toward Haru, holding it in front of him and sucking energy from his body. Before he could understand anything, Demon King Galadius's massive claw descended from above. He screamed in panic, shouting as demon energy ripped through his body. His form twisted, cracking apart under the pressure of the demonic energy. Demon King Galadius absorbed all of his demonic energy. His single red eye glowed fiercely as tendrils of power wrapped around his frame. After Galadius absorbed everything from Haru's body and threw the weakened Haru aside, then with a deep resonant voice, Demon King Galadius declared that now he could fight Linfeng, the successor of the Necromancer, properly. Linfeng stood quietly. He looked at Demon King Galadius and thought that even if all of his undead fought together, they still wouldn't be strong enough to defeat the Demon King head-on. Charging straight in would only get them all killed. It was not a smart plan. Then he noticed Haru on the ground, who had been drained earlier and lay weak. Then he looked at the glowing magic circle in the aura shining with summoning energy. Seeing this, Linfeng's expression changed. A small smile formed and he thought of a way. Then he raised his voice and called Demon King Galadius a foolish demon clan member, saying that since the demon already knew he was a necromancer, he was surprised that the demon didn't run away. Instead, the demon actually wanted to challenge him. He said that was interesting. The purple flames around Linfeng grew brighter as he lifted his hand. With a sharp gesture, he pointed forward and commanded his undead to attack. Hearing that, Demon King Galadius said that if this was Linfeng's way of provoking him, then so be it. He created a chain made of demonic energy and swung it toward Linfeng, saying he would act as he wished. Seeing that, Linfeng's female undead came forward and spun her staff as circles of light formed around her. A bright defensive wall flashed into existence. Linfeng's undead mage stepped forward, summoning countless floating bubbles around his body. The bubbles shimmered and formed a protective layer, but they couldn't block Demon King Galadius's attack. They were sent flying. Demon King Galadius looked at them with disdain. He mocked them, saying they were so weak that he was beginning to doubt how Linfeng even handled Kui. With the second attack, Demon King Galadius completely destroyed Linfeng's undead, shattering them instantly. After destroying Linfeng's undead, Demon King Galadius grabbed Linfeng and lifted him into the air, saying that before Linfeng died, he would allow him to say his last words. Demon King Galadius called Lin Feng a pitiful successor and said he did not understand the power of the undead at all. But suddenly Lin Feng smiled. He said that it was actually Demon King Galadius who didn't understand the power of the undead. Lin Feng pointed past Demon King Galadius to where his undead servant hovered, clutching Haru's limp head. He explained that he had just noticed a crucial detail. When Demon King Galadius appeared, he drained Haru's mana but did not kill him. He also noted that the mana fueling the summoning formation had decreased significantly. Hearing this, the undead creature's eyes widened in shock. Lin Feng freed himself from the Demon King, telling him that his summoning still had limitations. As he spoke, Demon King Galadius's body started to weaken. Lin Feng, standing below, smirked slightly and told him that his guess had been right all along. Demon King Galadius roared in rage, shouting that he wouldn't let Lin Feng go, but as he spoke, his massive body erupted with energy, and pieces of his form began to scatter apart. Light burst outward as the Demon King's body cracked and dissolved into fragments, leaving only fading traces in the air. Once the chaos settled, Lin Feng was left alone, standing on the shattered ground. He lifted a hand to the back of his head and gave a relaxed smile, telling Demon King Galadius that he would be waiting. Not far away, some officers noticed the explosion and rushed toward the scene. One of them shouted in alarm, telling the others to go check what happened. Lin Feng turned his head slightly as he heard their voices. His eyes widened as he looked toward the approaching figures, the faint purple sparks around him flickering in the dark. Without a second thought, Lin Feng ran from the scene, muttering, "This was not good." By dawn, he arrived at his farm outside the city. He walked forward slowly, the sunlight falling on him. He thought to himself that his mana was almost gone, and that he had barely escaped in time. He raised his fist slightly and reflected that if he hadn't won his final gamble, he would have been finished. Thinking all that, he walked toward his room. But suddenly, a crack appeared in the barrier around his farm. Lin Feng stopped and turned his head sharply, asking who it was. Just then, a blond man smashed through the barrier and landed in front of him. When Lin Feng saw the intruder, he immediately recognized him. It was the same blond man whom Lin Feng had met at the student gathering, the one whom Demon King Galadius had sent to kill Lin Feng. The blond man slowly walked forward, a sword hanging on his back. His face looked annoyed. He told Lin Feng that he had been enjoying a mission where he was killing freely, but his lord had suddenly stopped him. Because of that, he was in a very bad mood. He pulled out his sword with a grin and asked Lin Feng if he could just stand there and let him kill him. Hearing that, Lin Feng didn't flinch. He raised his hand slightly and calmly told all his undead to come out. He waved his hand again, expecting his undead to appear, but nothing happened. His expression changed to shock. He realized his mana was completely empty from the last fight. His body was in a mana vacuum, and he couldn't summon anything right now. In his eyes, he saw the reflection of the blond man rushing at him at full speed, sword ready to strike. The blond man leaped forward like a bullet, swinging his blade toward Lin Feng as the attack exploded with force. On Lin Feng's farm, the blond attacker rushed forward with a wide swing of his weapon. Lin Feng jumped back to avoid the strike. Lin Feng narrowed his eyes. He remembered something important. He thought about how the lamp of nature could make the undead stronger. He remembered that last time, his warrior undead was holding the lamp of nature in its hand. Surrounded by bright energy, Lin Feng's expression changed. He realized that if he could get the lamp of nature, he might still have a chance to turn the fight around. But he also knew time was almost gone. He ran forward quickly, but everything was happening too fast. As he ran away, suddenly his farm's powerful green earth spirit appeared, glowing brightly in the air. Its voice shouted, telling Lin Feng to fall back. The blond man swung his weapon down with full force. Lin Feng quickly moved back, the strike cutting through the air where he had just been. The blond attacker didn't stop. He swung again, creating a bright arc of light as he slashed forward. Lin Feng stepped back fast, the blow hitting the ground instead. Both of them stood facing each other under the orange sunset. The blond man held his blade ready while Lin Feng kept his stance light, watching carefully. But the next second, the ground behind Lin Feng cracked. A huge tree root rose up from beneath the earth, glowing in the sunset. The blond man's eyes widened as he jumped backward. Then a massive tree root covered in green energy rose from the broken ground. The blond man turned toward it, shocked as green light swirled around the giant body. The huge tree root attacked, smashing down on the ground and sending rocks flying everywhere. The impact threw the blonde-haired man backward as he tried to protect himself from the debris. More tree roots rose from the cracked earth. One of them slammed downward at the blond man while others wrapped around Lin Feng. Lin Feng was shocked as the glowing tree roots lifted him into the air. Shock filled his face as he wondered what was happening. Those tree roots formed a barrier around Lin Feng. A thick wall of tree roots was created in front of the blonde man. The blonde man glared at the tree root wall and said coldly that this was just a cheap trick. Bright energy gathered around his sword as he swung it and activated mana infusion. The blonde man then swung his blade, flames curling around him. A bright slash cut through the air as he used his dazzling swordsmanship technique. He stepped forward and stabbed at the giant tree root in front of him. Pieces of rock and bark cracked off as the blade hit. His sword cut through those tree roots like butter as he dragged his sword down in a long fiery arc. His face stayed calm and focused. As he looked to the other side, he saw Lin Feng running away as fast as he could. His shadow stretched under the orange sunset while the blonde man watched him go. Watching Lin Feng run like this, the blonde man remembered something from their past in a dark hall filled with tall stone pillars. A man in black was running at that time. From behind, this blonde man was also chasing him. His expression was sharp and determined as he sprinted forward, gripping the sword on his back, ready for the chase. But before he could catch up, a towering, shadowy figure appeared behind the blonde man. It was Demon King Galadius. His voice echoed, telling the blonde man to abort the mission and stop chasing. The blonde man looked up sharply. He argued that the noble they were chasing was part of their plan, and if he didn't kill him now, the enforcement team would arrive, and he would be the one in danger. But Demon King Galadius glared down at him and asked if he was questioning his decision. The pressure of Demon King Galadius hit the blonde man instantly. The blonde man was thrown back and crashed to the ground inside the stone hall. Struggling to rise, he pressed his hand to the floor, but suddenly blue energy started glowing around his whole body. Demon King Galadius told him to follow his mark, saying it would lead him forward to find the noble and kill him. Just as Demon King Galadius said that, a glowing emblem appeared. It was a circular crest with a coiled dragon in its center, the Galadius mark. The blonde man knelt down, holding the Galadius mark in his hand. He lowered his head and said softly that he would follow his lord's order. Now in the present, remembering the mark, the blonde man took it out and walked toward the tree root wall formed in front of him. Again, golden flames started rising from his palm as he looked at the plant wall in front, asking if these plants were from that farm before. He hit the plant wall with the golden flames in his hand. A huge explosion followed, shaking the ground and scattering debris everywhere. Through the flames, he walked to the other side of the plant wall. Realizing how it worked, fire wrapped around him as he stepped forward. His eyes were sharp. He pointed at Lin Feng and called him a traitor. He rushed forward again, fire rising from his hands as he shouted that trying to run wouldn't be that easy. Lin Feng sprinted across the ground as fast as he could. From behind, the blonde man chased him with heavy, powerful steps, closing the distance with every stride. But as he got closer to Lin Feng, tree vines attacked him from all directions. The blonde man leapt into the air. His body spun and twisted, dodging all those tree vines. Lin Feng kept running away in fear, but the blonde fighter was already midair behind him, sword drawn and ready to strike. Suddenly, the blonde man jumped and with powerful force grabbed Lin Feng and yanked him downward. His body smashed helplessly onto the ground as debris floated around him. The blonde man landed on the ground with a sharp smile. He looked at Lin Feng and said coldly that it was over. Under the burning sunset, the blonde man raised his sword high above his head. His stance showed that he was ready to bring Lin Feng down with full force, ending the chase once and for all. But Lin Feng looked straight at the blonde man with a calm, confident smile and said, "It really is over." Lin Feng had already secured the lamp of nature. The glowing crystal of the lamp floated above his hand, shining with bright light as Lin Feng tried to activate it. Green energy wrapped around it. Facing Lin Feng, the blonde man held his sword up, ready to end him. However, the lamp of nature didn't activate completely. Seeing that, Lin Feng was shocked, wondering if a necromancer's mana alone wasn't enough to activate the lamp. Lin Feng froze in shock. But then he used his nature energy, deciding he didn't care anymore, and demanded the crystal light up for him. Just as he poured in his nature mana, green flames suddenly burst out, and the lamp of nature shone even brighter. Lin Feng immediately used its power to push back the blonde man. The blonde man's eyes widened in shock as the glowing light reflected on his face. Lin Feng then stood up, his body glowing softly as the lamp of nature floated in his hand. The next second, Lin Feng's whole farmland exploded with a wave of energy. The ground shook as the entire area was filled with nature energy. Green vines broke through the earth and quickly spread across the area. They wrapped around trees and buildings, moving like living snakes. The blonde man turned and saw the vines heading straight toward him. Before he could react, they wrapped around his arms and legs, holding him tightly. He glared at those green vines with anger, shouting in rage. He yelled that Lin Feng was a disgusting nature type. He struggled as the glowing vines tightened around his body. The blond man used all his power and broke free from the vines by tearing them apart. Just as he fell to the ground, he took out his Gladius mark. Purple energy covered his whole body and soared as he activated its full power. The Gladius mark released huge amounts of demon energy, which the blond man absorbed and released into the surroundings. The blond man moved with lightning speed, attacking Lin Feng from all directions with his sword. Seeing him coming, Lin Feng stepped forward and used the lamp of nature, releasing huge amounts of nature energy. Using all that natural energy, Lin Feng finally summoned his undead spirit, his warrior undead, Ai Kuai. The original Necromancer appeared in front of Lin Feng, but he wasn't in his purple undead form. His whole body was covered by leaves and vines as he appeared in his human form. Just as he appeared, he used nature energy to block the blond man's multiple sword strikes. The blond man used his demonic energy to push He Kui back with full power, but it was no use. On top of that, the blond man's sword shattered completely. Ai Kui, covered in vines, stepped forward through the dust. His eyes were sharp as more green power gathered around his arms. Seeing him, the blond man's eyes widened in shock. He recognized Lin Feng's undead and asked if He Kui was dead. But He Kui didn't say anything and just stood with green flames dancing around him, ready for the next strike. Lin Feng, surrounded by glowing green energy, looked forward with a calm face. He gave a cold order to his undead, telling it to kill the blond man. At his command, Hai Kui, with leaf-like vines around his body, rushed forward. His arms swung out, green fire trailing behind him as he grabbed the blond man and dragged him along. The blond man's eyes widened in shock. He shouted, telling Hai Kui that they were allies. But before he could finish, a violent impact followed. A huge splash of blood burst across the scene. The man He Kui had grabbed was smashed brutally. His broken body fell to the ground, blood leaking from it as green flames burned around him. After killing the blond man, Lin Feng fell to his knees and coughed weakly. He was completely exhausted. The next second, Lin Feng lay on the ground as the glowing green flame started to fade from his body. He looked helpless and told He Kui that he was done for. In the next moment, he collapsed completely, falling over with no strength left. His body hit the ground hard. The lamp of nature crystal floated nearby, completely drained of its power. Ai Kui stood beside Lin Feng, watching him with a calm expression. He let out a slow breath, seeing that Lin Feng was just unconscious. Then Hai Kui's body started to change. Purple flames wrapped around him, climbing across his skin. His green vine-like armor shifted and disappeared under the rising dark energy. His entire form transformed. Black flame-shaped markings spread across his chest and arms. Purple fire swirled around him as his muscles tightened and his eyes sharpened. He completely transformed into his undead form. After the complete transformation of Hai Kui, his body suddenly shone brightly. Then pieces of his body began to break away. In the next moment, the purple shell covering him shattered into small fragments, and the undead aura around him faded completely, leaving nothing behind. The scene then shifted to a peaceful landscape. A bright valley stretched between distant mountains covered in green fields and forests. In that green field, someone waved flags in the distance. The flags carried the symbol of a lion's head. It was a group of armored knights riding in formation, their white horses marching proudly. Behind them, a decorated royal carriage traveled along the road. Inside the carriage, 3 people sat together, one in blue clothing, one with long red hair, and another dressed in dark attire. The carriage moved steadily as sunlight shone over the land. Inside the moving carriage, the red-haired warrior sat with a serious face. His armor reflected the sunlight coming through the window. Across from him, the older man with long brown hair and a beard looked at him calmly, waiting for him to speak. But a quiet moment passed between them. The red-haired warrior lowered his eyes as if thinking about something difficult. The older man watched him closely, also not saying a word. Then the older man turned his head toward the window. The bright sky and green mountains outside caught his attention as the carriage continued forward. But suddenly, a glowing green energy appeared outside, swirling around the trees that surrounded a wooden building hidden within the forest. As it appeared, the whole carriage shook violently, shocking the people sitting inside. All 3 looked ahead with tense expressions. The carriage suddenly shook again as something dark hit its roof. The impact made the whole vehicle jolt. Then from the carriage, bright streaks of energy shot across the sky, rushing past the moving vehicle. The horses kept running, but the disturbance was impossible to ignore. Inside, the red-haired man noticed it first. His eyes widened in surprise, and he leaned forward sharply. A knight stopped the carriage and bowed beside the window. The red-haired man and a blue-haired girl looked out from inside, watching him closely. After hearing what that knight said, the red-haired man sat back on the seat. His expression was calm but thoughtful as he stared ahead, thinking about what had just happened. At dawn, golden sunlight washed over Linfeng's farmland. Thick green vines erupted from the earth, tearing through the property and leaving nothing but scattered debris and settling dust in their wake. Suddenly, streaks of white light blitzed into the area. It was the same group from the carriage, touching down at the edge of the ruined fields. A man with long brown hair stepped forward, his silhouette framed by a lingering, radiant glow. His expression was dead serious as he surveyed the devastation. "Pure nature magic," he murmured in awe. Behind him, the others fanned out to inspect the massive vines, crouching beside the thickest stalks. "It's hard to believe an expert this powerful was hiding out in a remote place like this," one of his men remarked. Another chuckled. "I'd gladly step down and let them be the dean of the nature department if I could wield magic this pure." A younger member of the group studied the cratered ground and the eerie floating stones. "Looks like a clash with the demon clan," he pointed out. Just then, the brown-haired man spotted Linfeng sprawled out unconscious in the dirt, the lamp of nature lying right beside him. He hurried over and looked down at the boy. Recognizing the artifact instantly, the man's eyes widened in realization. He must have suffered backlash from forcefully activating the lamp of nature, he concluded. Glowing green energy flared around his hands as he dropped to one knee beside the unconscious Linfeng. Pressing both palms to Linfeng's chest, he channeled soft, stabilizing nature magic into the boy's body. Meanwhile, deep within Linfeng's consciousness, everything was shifting. He found himself floating in a brilliant blue void, awash in swirls of purple and blue energy. Chains of sheer power wrapped tightly around him. He looked around in shock, wondering to himself, "Is this place inside my own body?" The energy drifted gently around him, radiating a warm, calm, and welcoming sensation. He instinctively knew this power belonged to him. Looking around, he watched purple flames dance along his arms. "This must be my own power," he whispered. He reached out, and as his fingers brushed the drifting aura, purple energy coiled playfully around them. Soon, he was completely enveloped in those same purple and pink flames. His eyes sharpened as he analyzed the aura. "Is this necromancer power?" he wondered aloud. Without warning, the swirling force violently exploded outward, sending him tumbling head over heels through the kaleidoscope of light and color. The flames twisted violently around him. Gritting his teeth, he finally managed to steady himself. "What's going on?" he asked, his face pale with confusion. More purple flames whipped around him, binding his torso and arms tightly. Panic set in as a chilling realization hit him. The necromancer power wasn't under his control at all. Suddenly, in the distance, a pulsing, purple, heart-shaped core materialized, floating high above a sea of clouds. Linfeng stared up at it from below while purple flames and energy churned violently through the mist. Within the glowing fog, a small, shadowy creature began to take shape. A moment later, the clouds parted and Hiki, the original necromancer, now in human form, stepped out, wreathed in ominous pink and black energy. He hovered above Linfeng, who stared up in absolute shock. "Hiki!" Linfeng shouted. "Why are you alive? Didn't you die?" Hiki's expression remained perfectly calm. "I really did die," he answered, before a sinister smile crept across his face as the purple flames engulfed him. "But thanks to you, I was able to understand the true meaning of death." Hiki stretched out his hand, dark energy curling wickedly around his arm and fingers. He lunged forward, ready to strike. Linfeng gasped as a massive claw-like hand materialized from the swirling purple and black energy and shot toward him. The restrictive purple flames tightened around Linfeng, leaving him paralyzed. "This is bad," Linfeng yelled, sweat rolling down his face as he fought against his bindings. "I can't break free." Hiki rushed him with a crazed, manic smile, his arms practically dripping with dark fire. He let out a sharp laugh. "Once I kill you, your body becomes mine," he taunted, leaning in close so he was speaking directly into Linfeng's face. "When that time comes, I will be reborn." But just at that moment, in the physical world, the brown-haired man pumped a fresh surge of nature energy into Linfeng's body. Inside the mindscape, A blinding white impact slammed into Hiki from behind, knocking his body forward. His face twisted in shock as he whipped around. Linfeng stared upward, just as stunned by the unexpected rescue. Another burst of white light blasted down, rattling the entire purple-flamed void. Hiki jerked violently as the shockwave hit near him. A second blast followed immediately, slicing cleanly through the swirling colors. Then a massive glowing tree root shot out from the white clouds and slammed directly into Hiki, his face contorting in pain as the heavy blow connected. Linfeng drifted behind him, still restrained by the swirling energy. Hiki crashed hard into the ground, purple and black flames roaring wildly around him, dragging Linfeng down with him. More blinding strikes rained from above, forcing Hiki to brace himself. He let out a frustrated growl, muttering that the attack was terrifying. Realizing the source of the magic, Hiki's anger boiled over. He gritted his teeth and cursed under his breath. Nature-type power. Enraged, Hiki slammed Linfeng into the ground with everything he had. Linfeng hit the dirt hard as purple fire scattered around him. Hiki raised his hand for a killing blow, but before he could strike, Linfeng's dormant nature energy erupted, flooding the entire surrounding area. Linfeng's consciousness was suddenly pulled through a swirling vortex of bright colors. One side glowing a toxic purple, the other a vibrant green. He spun helplessly in midair, desperate to regain his balance, until he abruptly slammed into an invisible wall separating the two domains. Everything faded to pitch black for a moment. Then a faint glow, like a sunset bleeding through a dense forest, slowly pulled him back to reality. Linfeng fluttered his eyes open. He was lying on a makeshift medical bed with glowing patches stuck to his chest. Wiping cold sweat from his face, he gasped for air. That was way too close, he thought. His undead mana had dried up earlier, stripping Hiki of the strength needed to keep fighting. But he never could have guessed the Necromancer was literally hiding inside that very power. It was a ticking time bomb. As he processed the close call, he noticed the brown-haired man standing over him. "I've checked your condition," the man said calmly. "You've severely overdrawn your mana and suffered some light internal shock, but nothing serious." Nearby, one of his subordinates reported back from a perimeter sweep. "The aura we sensed earlier definitely belonged to a high-level demon clan member, someone at least above level 20. Noticing movement, the scout tapped his superior. "Sir, he's awake." Linfeng groaned in confusion as he slowly pushed himself up. Seeing him stir, the brown-haired man offered a reassuring nod. The treatment went very well. An officer in a sharp suit helped Linfeng sit up and cut right to the chase. "Were you the one who killed the demon clan member? How are you feeling now?" Linfeng didn't answer immediately. He noticed more men gathering around, eyeing him closely. Looking down, his expression hardened. "I have no idea who these people are," he reasoned. "Better to keep my mouth shut." Sensing his hesitation, the brown-haired man spoke up. "There's no need to be nervous," he said calmly, studying the boy. "His nature magic is incredibly pure," the man thought to himself. Could he be the child of nature that Vera mentioned? Just then, Linfeng's student ID card slipped out of his pocket. The man glanced at it. "Based on your clothes and ID, you must be from Sunhei Academy." He then pulled out his own credentials to formally introduce himself. "We are mentors from the Extraordinary Academy's Nature Department." Relieved, Linfeng pushed himself to his feet and bowed politely. "I'm Linfeng from Sunhei Academy. It's an honor to meet you, mentors." Just then, another group arrived on the scene. A man with flowing red hair approached, flanked by a squad of heavily armored soldiers. They all fell silent, taking in the absolute destruction of the farm. Stepping forward, the red-haired man locked eyes with the brown-haired leader and instantly recognized him. "Master Seymour? What happened here?" he asked. Master Seymour calmly explained the situation. There was a demon clan invasion. Fortunately, the demon was defeated, thanks to Linfeng here, from Sunhei Academy. The red-haired man blinked in surprise, a drop of nervous sweat rolling down his cheek. He walked over to Linfeng and clapped a heavy hand on the boy's shoulder. "It seems true heroes really do arise from the youth," he said with a proud smile. But as he glanced past the boy to look at something off to the side, his expression completely dropped. His eyes widened in absolute shock. The red-haired man stared at the scattered rocks, and that blond man's sword on the ground. His eyes widened as he recognized who the killer was. Master Seymour gently placed a hand on his shoulder and asked what was wrong. The red-haired man lowered his head slightly. Seymour called him Lord Count and asked again if he had discovered something. After a moment of silence, the red-haired man finally spoke. He said he was thinking about how hard they had fought on the front lines to resist the Demon Clan. Yet, even with all their effort, a Demon Clan member had still managed to sneak into the rear. He said it was truly shameful. Master Seymour looked at him calmly and said that the matter had already been resolved and they should return to the academy. But before leaving, Seymour looked back and told one of his men, Yolan, to bring Lin Feng along as well. They needed the principal to give an explanation. Inside the principal's office, the room glowed with warm sunset light. As Lin Feng, Master Seymour, and the principal faced each other, the principal sat behind his desk and said he already knew about the incident. He explained that the school would strengthen its management and that 3 more patrol teams would be added. Before he could finish speaking, Master Seymour suddenly grabbed him by the collar. Master Seymour pulled him close and shouted angrily. He said, "People only panic when death is already at their door, just like looking for a toilet only after making a mess." His anger turned into an outburst as he shook the principal, yelling about what use a principal like him even had. Lin Feng quietly placed a hand over his face, looking embarrassed while watching the scene. Master Seymour pulled the principal closer and glared at him. The principal, feeling embarrassed, whispered that a student was still in the room and begged him to give him some face. Master Seymour threw the principal onto the chair behind him and continued speaking. He said that while the principal admired wolf culture and didn't mind students acting wild, a student killing a member of the Demon Clan was actually a good thing. He insisted that this matter couldn't be brushed aside with just one sentence. The principal then turned to Lin Feng. He said Lin Feng had single-handedly killed a Demon Clan member and stopped their possible sabotage plans. Calling Lin Feng's achievements significant, he revealed a reward from the academy, a heroic spirit fragment. He held the glowing shard in his hand before passing it to Lin Feng. Lin Feng took the fragment and looked at it quietly. He asked what the use of the item was. The principal explained that the heroic spirit fragment was the leftover will of an ancient hero. He said it looked like Lin Feng had already found one fragment in a dungeon before. The principal continued, saying that when 2 fragments came from the same hero, they would be drawn to each other and merge. When that happened, a heroic spirit projection could awaken and fight as the user's partner. He added one more important detail. This heroic spirit projection had no restrictions. Hearing that, Lin Feng said that in that case, if he ever ran out of mana again, he would still have the strength to fight. He then pulled out the fragment he already had. Holding both pieces together, the 2 fragments began merging in his hands. A bright glow formed as the fragments fused. In the next moment, a green aura burst out and a long spear appeared, held by a heroic spirit projection standing before him. The green energy continued to swirl as the heroic spirit slowly took shape. Half of his face appeared first, calm and sharp, decorated with tribal markings and a glowing red gem on his forehead. Moments later, the full figure materialized, tall, muscular, and carrying a long, decorated spear. He wore ancient warrior clothing with a green robe draped across his body, and a red pendant hung around his neck. His presence felt powerful and dignified. A burst of light flashed under his foot as he knelt. The warrior lowered himself onto one knee before Lin Feng, placing a hand on his chest. He introduced himself respectfully, saying he was General Guan Yu, and greeted his summoner. The principal stared in shock. Unable to hide his surprise, he quickly grabbed a book and flipped through the pages, trying to figure out who this powerful spirit was. The principal stared at the open book in his hand, confusion written across his face. He wondered aloud why this heroic spirit didn't appear in any historical records. The summoned warrior stood with a hand on his chest, his posture calm and respectful. Across from him, Lin Feng watched quietly, saying nothing. He then raised his hand and the spirit turned into dark, shadowy energy and began to retreat at his command. After that, Lin Feng turned to the principal and Master Seymour. He bowed politely as both of them observed him with serious expressions. He then stepped through the doorway, leaving the principal's office and returning to his room. Just as he left, Master Seymour leaned toward the principal and spoke urgently. He said they had to take Lin Feng with them. He continued, explaining that the purity of Lin Feng's natural mana was something he had witnessed only once before in his life. He believed that with even a little cultivation, Lin Feng would surely achieve greatness in the future. But the principal calmly told Master Seymour to let Lin Feng decide for himself. Outside, Lin Feng closed his eyes and slowly shook his head. Remembering his fight with that demon worshipper, he quietly thought to himself that he was still too weak. He admitted that, when facing truly strong enemies, his methods were too few, and his endurance was still lacking. His gaze hardened. He knew he had to increase his strength as soon as possible. Otherwise, even farming in peace would be impossible. He walked through the academy grounds, thinking back to the mission hall. If he remembered correctly, many of the rewards there included skill scrolls. Soon he arrived at the Academy Mission Hall. Rows of blue mission screens floated in the air before him. He read through the rules. Mission rewards were divided into 4 tiers, A, B, C, and D. He decided that at his current level, the rewards from C rank and D rank missions were far too low. His attention shifted to the higher tier missions. The first mission involved clearing a demonized wolf pack in Eagle Rise Canyon, labeled as a B+ threat. The reward was a choice of 1 B-grade nature or elemental skill scroll, but it required a 5-person team with an average level of at least 15. Another mission listed the exploration of the ancient Mage Tower ruins below the 3rd floor with an A-level threat. The reward was 3 synthesizable fragments of an A-grade skill scroll. This mission required a high-level rune master and a team of at least 4. The third mission stated that supplies needed to be escorted to the eastern border, Iron Rock Town. The mission was rated at threat level B, and the reward was a B-grade general skill scroll and 100 military merit points. It also required a team of at least 2 people who had survival skills and fire-type combat abilities. After reading that, Lin Feng reached out and tapped the mission screen with his fingers. He muttered the name softly, Iron Rock Town. He remembered that it was an important military town. He recalled hearing that because soldiers stayed there for long periods, they had developed a special military farming method. This method could grow food and medicinal plants even in harsh, barren places. A small smile appeared on his face. If he could learn this method, it would be very useful. Then he looked at the requirement again. The mission needed a 2-person team. Seeing that, he sighed to himself. Finding someone with fire-type abilities would be troublesome. Just then, nearby, 2 girls were arguing loudly. One of them shouted that it was all because of the other. Hearing that, Lin Feng immediately turned around, watching the scene in front of him. A group of students had gathered nearby. In the middle of the crowd, a pink-haired girl was arguing with a blonde girl. Behind the blonde girl, her 2 bodyguards were standing. When Lin Feng saw the pink-haired girl, he immediately recognized that it was Ailing. Ailing glared angrily. She shouted that the blonde girl had made fake potions for them, and because of that, she ended up hitting them. The blonde girl crossed her arms and argued back. She said that Ailing did hit her, and she demanded compensation, 1 or 2 gold-tier items, before she would let the matter go. Other students watching from the side whispered among themselves. They called this group a gang and said this was already the 3rd time this month. They wondered why new students kept falling for the same trick. They explained that the group often scammed newcomers with fake potions. Ailing stomped forward and yelled again, this time demanding that her demon bear, Gaul, be returned. The blonde girl stood with her bodyguards and told Ailing that she had already used the strengthening potion. Once someone drank it, she said, it was gone. Hearing that, Ailing stepped forward angrily. Her hand reached back and she pulled out 2 black blades with a sharp motion. She crossed the blades in front of her, her eyes full of anger. Her stance showed she was ready to fight. The blonde girl didn't back down. She raised her voice and shouted to everyone around them. She asked if Ailing wanted to fight and told the crowd to look. Someone was being unreasonable and hitting people. A few steps away, Lin Feng watched them silently. He didn't say anything, only observed the scene with a calm expression. He turned slightly, noticing the commotion growing louder. The blonde girl pointed at Ailing and told the crowd that this woman had asked her to make a strengthening potion, but after drinking it, she refused to admit that she owed anything. The blonde girl shouted again, saying that Ailing even accused her of stealing the materials. Her face turned serious and angry as she spoke. Just then, Lin Feng stepped forward and told the blonde girl that she did embezzle the materials. The blonde girl was shocked and turned to look at who it was. Lin Feng simply looked back at her without changing his expression. Seeing Lin Feng's clothes, the blonde girl realized that he was someone from Sunhei Academy. She pointed at him, complaining loudly. She said he could eat whatever he wanted, but he couldn't say whatever he wanted. She claimed she worked very hard and didn't deserve false accusations. Ailing just stood there listening to the argument. Hearing the blonde girl, Lin Feng activated his natural energy. A green flame suddenly appeared in his hand. The blonde girl flinched and covered her ears, thinking she was about to be attacked, but Lin Feng simply held the green flame close to her. She slowly opened her eyes and checked herself. There was no injury. She looked confused and asked why there was no damage. Just then, Lin Feng reached toward her waist pouch. With one quick pull, he tore the pouch open. Something dropped out. It was a demon bear gall, which had been hidden inside her bag. The blonde girl turned around in shock, staring at what had fallen. Lin Feng held up the glowing green flame again, showing everyone the truth. Students around him whispered loudly. One said, "This woman always targets newcomers to scam them." Another pointed out that the item she hid looked exactly like a demon bear gall. The blonde girl pointed angrily at Ailing. She said that this time, a senior from Sunhei Academy had stepped in to help her. Then she warned that next time, she wouldn't be so lucky. But just as she tried to storm off, Linfeng grabbed her wrist. She froze in surprise and looked back at him. Linfeng stood calmly and told her to hand over the demon bear gall. After she handed it over and ran away, Linfeng held the brown demon bear gall in his hand and asked if this was the same one from last time. Ailing looked at him with a soft expression. She explained that she had originally saved it for him, but after losing to him last time, she felt unwilling. She admitted she had thought about turning it into a potion to make herself stronger. Linfeng threw the demon bear gall toward Ailing and said that since he had promised to give it to her, he would keep his word. He admitted that the demon bear gall didn't improve his strength as much as he had expected. After giving it back, Linfeng turned to leave. Ailing called out to him gently. She thanked him, saying his name with a shy expression. He looked back at her calmly and said there was no need to thank him. If she really wanted to repay him, he asked her to help him find a fire-type ability user. As he said that, he turned around and asked if he remembered correctly she was a fire-type, wasn't she? She stopped and glanced back at him, smiling faintly. She answered with a soft yes. He smiled in return, relaxed and confident under the golden light. A few minutes later, they went to the mission hall. A staff member walked up to them, saying that his mission request had been accepted, and handed over the mission items. He asked Linfeng to keep them safe. Linfeng held the mission scroll in his hand and stared at it quietly. He didn't say anything, but his eyes showed a hint of speechlessness. He looked down at the scroll and thought excitedly about learning a planting method and a new skill. He also received a thick book among his mission items. On the cover, the title showed that it was an ancient array manual, a translated copy. That same night, in the Iron Lion Count's residence, the scene shifted to a secret chamber. Inside the dim, cold room, the Count sat alone, surrounded by twisting shadows. He spoke slowly, saying that both of his nephews, Haru and Tuka, were dead. Dark mist curled around him as he continued. He said the Academy's law enforcement team had tightly covered up the news. Even now, they still didn't know who the killer was. From within the shadowy fog, another figure spoke. The figure asked why he had been summoned. Was that all he wanted to say? The Count clenched his fist tightly as he spoke. He reminded the shadowy figure that there had been a promise. As long as he provided intelligence about the frontline defenses and helped cover the infiltration, he would receive support. His expression twisted with anger. He shouted that the other party had promised to help him rise to a high position. Then his voice cracked with rage. He yelled that because of the defeat in the war, he had already been demoted from Duke to Count by that old man. His eyes widened, veins bulging as he screamed, asking how things had ended up like this. He continued shouting, saying his military power had been taken away and his territory had been cut in half. He couldn't even protect his own nephews now. He demanded to know where the promised aid was. The dark figure answered calmly from within the swirling shadow mist. It said the battlefield was unpredictable, and their side had also taken losses. As for the nephews, the figure claimed their deaths were due to their own weakness. If the Count had sacrificed Haru and Tuka earlier as planned, the situation wouldn't have turned out like this. The Count trembled and shouted back, asking if they thought he hadn't wanted to follow the plan. But before he could finish, a pale, ghostly hand reached out from the shadows. Dark energy wrapped around the hand. The Count fell silent for a moment, his red eyes trembling with anger. He gritted his teeth but couldn't find the words to answer. Across from him, the shadowy figure spoke coldly. It said that Lord Galadima only cared about results. The Count's face twisted with frustration as he snapped back. He said that ever since he had opened a back door on the battlefield for them, the old man had been watching him closely. He asked how he was supposed to help any further. The shadow replied without emotion. It said that was his own problem, and reminded him not to forget his position. The shadowy figure stepped forward angrily. It pointed out that even the group from the nature department could not save him now. Its voice turning sharp as it spoke, the Count's expression tightened. He stared into the swirling darkness, fear and anger mixing in his eyes. His jaw clenched as he stared forward, his teeth grinding in anger. Purple shadows drifted around him, showing how tense he had become. Then the shadowy figure stood on the steps, its dark aura spreading wide. It spoke coldly, saying that relying on the nature department to remove the curse would only cause the Count to die even faster. After saying that, it retreated. The Count turned slightly, watching the swirling dark energy disappear. His expression remained stiff and troubled. The Count lifted his coat and began walking away, his steps confident as his hair swung behind him. He spoke without looking back. He said they had already set things up in Iron Rock Town, and reminded his men to move the garrison away when the time came. High in the mountains, a long winding road led toward Iron Rock Town. Two figures walked side by side along the narrow path, surrounded by endless green ridges under the bright sky. It was Lin Feng and Ailing walking through a sunlit forest. Ailing suddenly turned her head in surprise. Her eyes widened as she looked behind them. A massive wolf, taller than both of them, walked quietly at their backs, its red eyes glowing and its fangs exposed. Lin Feng didn't notice it, but Ailing stared at the creature in confusion. In the next moment, she jumped forward, grabbing her weapon with one hand. Her expression turned sharp and focused as dark lightning formed under her grip. She leaped into the air, her body spinning as flames erupted around her. Her weapon slashed through the sky, creating burning arcs aimed at the wolf below. The wolf raised its claws in defense as the fiery attack came down from above, but it was no use. In a single attack, Ailing cut down the wolf's neck. The girl looked down with a frown and said that something felt wrong. She pointed out that this was already the third attack within the past hour. Lin Feng walked up to Ailing and asked her what was wrong. Ailing stepped closer to him, still gripping her weapon behind her. Looking at the wolf, she explained that Iron Rock Town was an important military town, so troops regularly cleared and patrolled the area. She continued, saying that under normal circumstances, in a place so close to the main road, even large wild beasts were rarely seen, let alone demonic wolves. Lin Feng listened, still uneasy as they continued down the mountain path. Ailing said that ever since they entered the mountain area that morning, they had already faced 3 waves of attacks. She added that this was very abnormal. Hearing that, Lin Feng crouched low on the hillside ahead of her, scanning the surroundings. Terraced fields stretched far into the distance behind him. Green energy suddenly flowed around Lin Feng, wrapping the ground in glowing patterns as he used his ability. He leaned forward and stood up slowly after finishing his check, pointing toward the forest. He reported that the surrounding plants hadn't detected any anomalies, but he was still cautious. He told her that, regardless of the situation, they should speed up and try to reach the outskirts of Iron Rock Town before dark. The two of them moved quickly through the mountains, their bodies turning into streaks of white light as they shot across the sky. Soon, they arrived at the outskirts of Iron Rock Town. Massive white stone structures rose layer by layer, covered in greenery and bright flowers under the clear blue sky. Lin Feng stared at the city in surprise. He asked if the sight before them was the suspended terraced fields. He immediately ran toward the city excitedly, saying that the view was spectacular and that he was ready to learn the planting method. Before he could go any farther, Ailing grabbed the back of his jacket and told him to wait. She stood close to him, staring around with a tense expression. She pointed out that the place was too quiet. Even though Iron Rock Town was an important military town, the two walked through completely empty streets. Ailing told him to prepare for battle and said they should move forward carefully. They ran between the buildings, checking the silent town. As they turned a corner, they suddenly spotted a soldier sitting against a stone pillar with a rifle in his hands. Lin Feng called out to Ailing that someone was there. He stepped closer and placed a hand on the soldier's shoulder, but the soldier didn't react. Lin Feng looked down and told Ailing that the soldier was already dead. They continued around the next corner and saw more bodies lying across the ground. Ailing looked at the scene in shock, saying it made no sense. Iron Rock Town had a garrison of 3,000 soldiers in strong defensive formations. Something like this should have been impossible. While speaking, Ailing suddenly froze, her eyes wide with shock. She pointed toward a room and whispered urgently that the demons were there. Inside, stone-skinned horned demons stood guard beside a stone altar covered in strange runes. Lin Feng narrowed his eyes, watching quietly from behind her. Together, they peeked around the corner and saw more demons gathered around a glowing purple formation. Bones were scattered across the floor as the demons worked on the ritual. Ailing spoke in a serious tone. She said the demons were creating some kind of formation and that they couldn't allow them to finish. She told him she would lure the demons away, giving him the chance to destroy the formation. But Lin Feng rested his hand on her shoulder. He pointed out that the demons were all around level 35 and asked how she planned to lure them away. Ailing stepped forward with a determined look, her expression firm and unshaken as she thought of a plan. Suddenly, purple energy burst out around them. Lin Feng noticed the air crackling with magical power. He grabbed Ailing quickly, pulling her close in one strong motion, and shouted for her to go. Together, they leapt away just as purple blades of energy shot past them. A violent explosion of purple light erupted behind them, sending rocks and debris flying across the room. Lin Feng shielded Ailing with his arm as demon warriors rushed toward them. From inside the ritual area, a demon's voice shouted that someone had intruded, ordering 2 others to go and kill them. One demon jumped forward, glowing purple wings of energy spreading behind him. He aimed his spear at them and roared that they wouldn't escape, that they would die. Lin Feng quickly reached out and grabbed Ailing's arm, pulling her toward him as danger approached. The next second, huge purple blasts rained down from above. Explosions hit the ground around them, sending debris flying everywhere. The 2 of them ran together, narrowly avoiding each strike. Ailing stumbled and looked up in fear. A bright purple beam was coming straight toward her, and she threw her hands up in panic. Lin Feng saw the danger and shouted for her to watch out. He moved instantly, creating a nature energy barrier to block the attack and pulling her close. Ailing looked up at him in shock as another blast hit the ground behind them. Lin Feng stood calmly, looking ahead with a confident expression. Dust floated around him from the earlier explosion. Ailing stared at him with wide eyes, blushing at how heroic he looked in that moment. Suddenly, both of them were thrown into the air by a burst of purple energy. Their bodies spun as rocks and glowing lines shot past them. They landed hard on the sandy ground. Smoke slid across the surface as several spear-wielding demons ran toward them. Ailing pushed herself up and grabbed her dagger, which glowed with a bright green light. She held it tightly, glaring forward, but suddenly the green light disappeared from her weapon. She stared at it in shock. When Lin Feng tried to use his power, green energy gathered around his hand, swirling like a flame before vanishing as well. Lin Feng looked at his hand and spoke calmly. He deduced that the mana in this area couldn't be channeled, likely due to a mana imprisoning effect from the formation. He then took out the item he had received from the principal and pressed it, but nothing happened. Lin Feng was shocked to realize he couldn't even summon heroic spirits. This was bad. A skull-faced demon appeared with a wide grin. It asked if they liked the anti-magic formation, boasting that only demonic energy could be used here. It laughed loudly. More demon soldiers advanced with their weapons drawn while Ailing, and Lin Feng stood facing them. Lin Feng glanced at Ailing and had a quick thought. He knew undead magic didn't follow the normal magic system. However, with Ailing standing right next to him, he knew that using it would expose his secret. He figured their only option was to run. Suddenly, Ailing called out to Lin Feng. She told him she would hold the enemies off so he could escape to the Chongfeng fortress in the east for help. Lin Feng stared at her in surprise and asked what would happen to her. Her hand tightened into a fist as she spoke again, saying that someone had to go back and report the situation. She turned her back slightly and added that she had lost to him in their last match and couldn't let him look down on her again. Raising her weapon with firm eyes, she shouted for him to go. Lin Feng watched her silently, his expression serious. Suddenly he moved behind Ailing and struck the back of her neck. Her eyes widened in shock as the hit landed. Green energy wrapped around her body, her expression freezing in surprise. Her mouth slowly opened as she lost her strength. Yellow, lightning-like lines ran across her body, and she collapsed backward, unconscious. 2 skeleton demons watched and mocked Lin Feng. One of them asked if he was betraying his teammate just to survive. The other sneered that this was humanity, despicable and shameless. But Lin Feng had caught Ailing before she hit the ground. He held her in his arms, looking down at her sleeping face. He murmured that this way he wouldn't have to worry about her seeing him make a move. Lin Feng looked up at the enemies with a calm smile. One of the skeleton demons shouted at him, asking why he was still laughing when he was about to die. Lin Feng reached into his jacket and pulled something out. Green energy glowed in his hand as he raised the lamp of nature. A horned skeleton demon pointed his spear at Lin Feng, shouting that he was courting death by daring to use the lamp of nature in front of them. Purple flames fell from above like meteor fire. Lin Feng stood with his back to them, holding the green crystal as the bright purple streaks rained down. Just as the waves of purple attacks rushed toward him, a green barrier formed. The energy circled him like a shield, pushing away the smoke and force around his feet. Lin Feng stood calmly inside the green light, holding the glowing lamp of nature. It floated slightly as green flames wrapped around it. The next second, Lin Feng infused his necromancy energy into the artifact, transforming the lamp of nature into the lamp of the undead. Lin Feng held the lamp of undead in his hand. Purple energy glowed inside it as he looked at the demons with a calm smile. Just as he activated the lamp, his necromancer power awakened. Lin Feng's undead, Savis, covered in purple energy, appeared behind him. She stood quietly like a guardian. At the same time, the demon struck. Several huge purple energy blades came crashing toward Lin Feng with explosive force. but something blocked those energy blades with a violent purple explosion, sending debris flying everywhere. It was Lin Feng's undead, Savis, who had blocked the demon's attack and stood firmly in front. While energy swirled around her, the demon looked at the scene in shock. It shouted in disbelief, realizing that these creatures were undead and questioning why they were appearing. Lin Feng looked forward with a calm expression and said that the hunt had begun. Dark energy gathered around him as several powerful undead figures appeared. They stood like a terrifying army surrounding their master. On the ruined streets outside Iron Rock Town, several demon warriors faced Savis. Savis moved first. She swung her scythe, sending a huge wave of purple energy crashing forward. The attack slammed into the demon warriors with explosive force. The purple blast shattered the ground and blew the demons apart, sending bones and debris flying across the ruined street. Just as those demons died, in the middle of the city where the altar was located, a candle representing the demons' lives burned with purple energy. A powerful demon who was raising his arms felt the purple energy explosion. He looked toward the battlefield with empty eyes as he realized something strange. The demon's eyes suddenly glowed red as he spoke in surprise. He wondered how there could be a summoner able to ignore the anti-magic zone. At that moment, a tall demon warrior stepped forward. Purple energy twisted around his body as he moved toward the battlefield. He stated that the summoner himself was not very strong. The undead army was the real problem. He ordered the others to hold off the undead while he dealt with the summoner personally. Purple energy gathered in the demon's hand as he also used summon magic. Several demon soldiers appeared and raised their weapons. With powerful force, they jumped into the battlefield, rushing forward with shields and swords to block Lin Feng's undead army. The tall demon looked at Lin Feng's undead and calmly explained that summoners could be troublesome opponents. However, he believed that once the summoner was killed, all of the summoned creatures would disappear on their own. With that thought in mind, he turned his attention toward Lin Feng. The tall demon mocked him, calling him foolish. With incredible speed, the tall demon moved. Shocked, Lin Feng raised his arm to block the debris flying toward him. The tall demon laughed, saying Lin Feng was practically giving him a free victory. But Lin Feng was not scared. He looked up calmly at the demon charging toward him. Dark purple energy surged through the air as the tall demon gathered power and prepared a devastating attack. He unleashed a technique called Demon Battle Art, Soul-Shattering Fist. Purple energy twisted around his arm as he raised his fist high into the air. With killing intent in his voice, he shouted for Lin Feng to die. The powerful energy rushed toward Lin Feng like a storm, but Lin Feng remained calm. His eyes narrowed slightly as he watched the attack approach. Without panic, he lifted his hand and clenched his fist. Bright green energy suddenly appeared around his arm, forming a glowing blade-like aura. It was nature energy wrapping around his fist as if it were a weapon. Seeing this, the tall demon suddenly paused in surprise. The demon's powerful punch crashed forward, releasing a huge burst of energy. The attack exploded through the air, but Lin Feng was not pushed back. He muttered about his punch, telling the tall demon that his strike carried the strength of 20 years of power. Just as he said that, Lin Feng's green energy fist slammed directly into the demon's attack. The two forces collided violently in mid-air. Lin Feng stared at the clash and shouted, asking the tall demon if he could really block such a powerful attack. The next instant, a massive explosion erupted where the two attacks met. Blinding light burst outward as the ground shattered and debris flew everywhere. Meanwhile, Lin Feng's undead warriors were proving much stronger than the demon warriors. Under their relentless attacks, the demon's bones cracked apart violently. Lin Feng stood calmly, watching his undead one-sidedly destroy the demon warriors. After killing all the demons, Lin Feng's undead returned to his side, covered in purple energy. Seeing all the summoned demon warriors dead, the tall demon looked at Lin Feng with fear and demanded to know who he was. Lin Feng stood quietly with his hands in his pockets, completely calm. He then asked the tall demon, who was already injured by the energy blast, why they were attacking Iron Rock Town, and demanded to know what their goal was. The tall demon laughed coldly and mocked him, saying a mere human insect had no right to interrogate him. He warned that once the Great Galadosa descended, every human there would become nothing more than fuel. Hearing that name, Lin Feng's eyes sharpened slightly. He immediately recognized, and muttered with a serious expression that it was Galadosa again. He slightly turned his head and called to Savis, who was standing behind him. Savis was confused and stared at Lin Feng with question marks in her eyes, trying to understand if he was calling her. As she got closer, Lin Feng told her to handle the interrogation, since she had said she was good at interrogating enemies. Hearing that, Savis smiled mischievously as purple energy flowed around her body. Lin Feng looked at the enemy calmly and spoke in a low voice. He said he needed their entire plan. He wanted to Know everything, their allies, their locations, and every single detail. Seva stepped forward slowly, a playful smile appearing on her face. Without hesitation, she raised her weapon and swung it down. In the next moment, purple energy burst forward like a giant wave. The tall demon rushed forward angrily, his red eyes glowing with rage. But before he could react, the massive purple attack crashed toward him. A powerful force slammed into the ground. The stone floor shattered instantly, and huge cracks spread across the area as debris flew everywhere. The enemy stood there for only a moment before the purple energy swallowed him completely. The attack exploded with terrifying power. He screamed as the energy continued to surge around him. When the blast finally settled, his entire body was covered by the purple power, trapping him completely. The battlefield fell silent as the overwhelming attack finished. Lin Feng stood quietly, his expression calm as he looked ahead. Nearby, Ailing lay unconscious on the ground. Without showing any concern, Lin Feng simply glanced at her before turning away. He slowly walked forward, leaving her behind. A faint purple trail of energy followed behind him as he moved. Soon, he arrived at a strange structure in the middle of the area. In front of him stood an ancient altar platform. Above the altar, a glowing magical formation floated in the air. Purple flames burned at the center, while mysterious runes formed a star-shaped array around it. Lin Feng stared at the altar carefully. At the center of the purple flames, something unusual floated in the air. A strange object was sealed inside the burning magical energy. As he observed the altar, Lin Feng quickly sensed something wrong. He realized that the natural magic in the surrounding space was being suppressed. After thinking for a moment, he came to a troubling conclusion. The nature magic around the area was completely blocked. In fact, almost all magic in this place had been sealed. After observing the surroundings, he realized that this place was an anti-magic zone. He slowly raised his hand and tried to touch the floating magical energy in front of him. However, the moment he got close, the magic reacted strangely. The energy twisted and distorted. Surrounded by mysterious runes that blocked outside interference, Lin Feng narrowed his eyes as he analyzed the situation carefully. He soon realized that approaching the altar directly with physical strength alone would not work. If brute force could not solve the problem, then he would need another method. He turned around and called one of his undead warriors standing behind him. The undead warrior stepped forward slowly and walked toward Lin Feng. Its body was covered in black energy, with purple lines spreading across its skin like cracks of power. Lin Feng stood calmly in front of the altar. His expression remained cold and steady as he gave a simple command. He told the undead warrior beside him to smash the altar. The undead warrior immediately stepped forward. Purple energy surged around its body, crackling like violent lightning. The undead warrior raised both of its arms as power gathered in its fists. With a roar, it swung its arm forward. The punch landed directly on the altar platform. Purple energy exploded outward as the powerful strike shattered the stone structure. Pieces of rock broke apart and flew into the air as the altar began to collapse. At the center, the strange, purple energy started swirling violently. The broken stones were pulled into the vortex as the magical flames twisted into a spinning storm of power. In the next moment, the entire altar was swallowed by the swirling purple energy, forming a massive glowing sphere that filled the area. But the next second, the purple energy sphere trembled violently for a moment before suddenly dispersing. The dark magical flames slowly faded, leaving the area quiet again. After the altar was destroyed, the surroundings became silent. There was no movement or reaction from anywhere. Lin Feng concluded that there were no signs of life left. The ground was covered with broken stones, scattered demon bones, and old weapons. Demon bodies lay across the floor. Lin Feng stood silently among the ruins. Thinking about the situation, he decided that since nothing else seemed to be happening, he should go back and check on Ailing first. With that thought in mind, he returned to where she lay unconscious. Lin Feng checked Ailing's condition carefully. After examining her injuries, he calmly concluded that aside from some minor internal injuries and a few surface wounds from earlier, she was basically fine. Seeing Lin Feng treating Ailing like that, Savis, standing beside him, looked at him with wide eyes. She was a little unhappy, feeling wronged. Lin Feng noticed her expression and paused for a moment. A drop of sweat appeared on his face as he stared at her in slight confusion. He realized that Savis also had her own feelings. He tried to say something, but before he could speak, he suddenly saw something that changed his expression. His eyes widened as he saw something glowing under Ailing's clothes. Without wasting another second, Lin Feng pulled out the thick red book with a golden star on its cover that he had gotten from the mission hall. The moment he opened it, the pages began flipping rapidly on their own. He stared at the book with a serious expression as it floated slightly in front of him. Then, strange magic suddenly appeared. A large red magic circle formed in the air, glowing brightly with complex patterns and symbols. Green energy streams burst out from the circle. Linfeng stepped back in shock as nature energy flowed around it like waves, sparkling as it surrounded the pages. Looking at the strange scene in disbelief, Linfeng realized that the book had activated by itself. In the northern part of Iron Rock Town near Riverside Town, the surroundings had finally calmed down as the scattered mana slowly recovered. Linfeng stood outside holding the strange book in his hand while green energy continued to swirl around it. He stared at it carefully, his eyes sharp as he tried to understand what had just happened. He realized the book had activated automatically. Not far away, Ailing lay unconscious on the ground. Linfeng quickly moved toward her and crouched down beside her. Without wasting time, he opened his bag, preparing to check her condition. His expression turned serious as he sensed mana in the distance. He looked in that direction, realizing that it was the direction leading toward the Demon Clan battlefield. Without hesitation, Linfeng made his decision. He stood up and immediately rushed forward, moving at high speed as he headed straight toward that location. Linfeng moved rapidly across the ruined battlefield, his body cutting through the air as streaks of green energy followed behind him. The ground below was completely destroyed, burnt earth, broken buildings, and flames still rising into the sky. Without slowing down, he leaped forward, crossing over shattered rocks and collapsing debris. Suddenly, he saw something. In front of him, several broken stone fragments floated in the air, each carved with strange symbols. Linfeng's eyes narrowed slightly as he observed them. Not far away there was a city. The city's ruined streets stretched forward, filled with destruction. Flames burned fiercely in the distance, and smoke rose into the sky. As Linfeng walked in, screams suddenly echoed through the area. Someone laughed crazily while another voice cried out in pain. Linfeng walked forward calmly. Sweat appeared on his face as he realized that there were still people here. He took out a cloak to hide his identity and moved in that direction. Ahead, a terrifying demon chased after a woman and a young girl through the ruined battlefield. Its hollow eyes burned with cruel intent as it raised its sword and mocked them, asking where they thought they were running. The woman ran desperately, holding the child's hand tightly as they stumbled across the broken ground. Sharp stones cut into their feet. Suddenly, the child tripped and fell hard onto the ground. The woman turned back in panic, her heart tightening as she saw the girl collapse. Before she could react, the demon closed the distance in an instant. With a powerful swing, it brought its sword down toward them. The woman's face turned pale as death approached. She shouted with all her strength, telling the child to run. In the next moment, a dark slash cut through the air, tearing across the woman's body as the attack landed with brutal force. The little girl's face twisted in fear as tears streamed down her cheeks. Her mouth opened wide as she cried out in despair, watching everything unfold in front of her. The demon raised its sword high into the air again. Its empty eye socket seemed to lock onto its target as it prepared to strike without mercy. Just as the blade was about to fall, a sudden flash of light appeared. A hand reached out and caught the attack mid-air, stopping the sword completely. It was Linfeng, now dressed in a flowing white robe. He stood between the child and the demon, shielding her from danger. The girl stared at him in shock, unable to understand what had just happened. At the same time, one of Linfeng's warrior undead, surrounded by a purple aura, rose behind him. Before the demon could react, the undead warrior moved instantly with terrifying speed. It closed the distance and grabbed the demon, unleashing a violent attack infused with purple energy. The demon was stunned upon seeing the undead. In that instant, the undead warrior's violent burst of purple energy tore through the battlefield. Sharp, blazing streaks of power shot forward, sending the demon flying. The demon hit the ground and exploded on impact, sending debris and dust flying everywhere. Linfeng turned his head calmly and looked back. In a relaxed tone, he asked if the child was all right. The little girl, still trembling, quickly pointed toward the distance. Her voice was filled with urgency as she said that there were still many people over there and begged him to save them. Hearing this, Linfeng remained calm. He lowered himself slightly and gently placed his hand on her head, reassuring her without saying a word. The girl looked up at him, tears still running down her face, but her expression slowly softened as she felt a sense of safety. Without hesitation, Linfeng spoke firmly, saying that he would go and save them right away. With a dark, twisting force spinning like a violent vortex, Linfeng disappeared from there. At the same time, in the Riverside Town Central Plaza, Flames continued to burn through the shattered buildings, and smoke filled the sky. In the middle of the destruction, a demon commander clad in armor stood tall among a group of frightened people. Its empty gaze faced forward as it made a cold offer, saying that if they handed over the item, it would give them a chance to serve its lord. Nearby, a knight in damaged armor struggled on one knee, gripping his sword tightly. His face was filled with pain and determination as he tried to hold his ground despite his injuries. Just then, a demon soldier rushed forward through the burning ruins, panic clear in its movements as it reported urgent news. It announced that a person in a black robe had suddenly barged in, leading a group of undead with him. Hearing this, the demon commander remained calm and unimpressed. In a cold tone, he dismissed the situation, saying it was nothing more than a necromancer and questioning why everyone was panicking. To him, it was nothing but disgraceful behavior. Without wasting time, the commander gave his order. He told the others to keep an eye on the situation while he personally went to meet this necromancer. But when the demon commander got there, his eyes widened in shock. In front of him, the battlefield was filled with chaos and dark energy, and Lin Feng's undead were killing all the demon soldiers one after another. Seeing this, the commander issued a single, ruthless command for his soldiers to kill them. The demon commander raised his sword high and charged forward without hesitation. His blade came crashing down toward one of Lin Feng's undead warriors, aiming to cut it down in a single strike. In the next moment, however, the undead warrior punched him with powerful force. The impact landed directly on the skeleton's body. A loud crack echoed through the battlefield as the skeleton's chest shattered under the force. Its bones split apart, and its body was blown backward, crashing heavily onto the ground. The demon commander lay there, defeated in a single exchange. Meanwhile, Lin Feng stood calmly in the ruins. Behind him, his undead army radiated terrifying energy. Their presence alone made the battlefield suffocating. When the demon soldiers saw that their commander couldn't last a second in front of Lin Feng's undead, they began to panic. Fear spread through their ranks as they turned and ran, shouting desperately for everyone to flee and escape. Seeing this, Lin Feng let out a quiet breath. A drop of sweat slid down his face as he admitted to himself that it was a good thing everyone had escaped because he had almost run out of mana. He then turned his head toward the injured humans. Not far away, the group of survivors sat weakly on the broken ground. Still shaken from what had just happened, Lin Feng walked forward slowly. Behind him stood his two terrifying-looking undead. Seeing them, the survivors grew scared. One of the soldiers at the side tightened his grip on his sword and stared at Lin Feng in shock. With disbelief in his voice, he asked if he was truly a necromancer. Hearing this, Lin Feng admitted in his mind that he was indeed a necromancer, but he also understood that saying it out loud would only make people even more afraid. He gave a faint smile and spoke lightly, asking if they would believe him if he said he was not a necromancer. Then he questioned them about what had actually happened there, but one of the soldiers stepped forward and spoke firmly. He declared that the Empire had already issued an order. Every necromancer was now a wanted target. Lin Feng did not react with anger. Instead, he calmly reminded them that he had just saved their lives. He pointed out that if he were truly their enemy, they would have all been dead long ago. Hearing that, the soldiers looked around the battlefield, seeing only a few survivors left among the fallen bodies and scattered weapons. That soldier clenched his teeth, clearly struggling between fear and pride. Then he lowered his sword, accepting that he couldn't do anything. He called Lin Feng an unknown powerhouse and asked him to come along. Lin Feng followed him with his undead. The soldier led Lin Feng to a different place where a box was placed. Pointing at it, the soldier stepped forward and explained the situation. He said that members of the demon clan had suddenly appeared out of nowhere, and everything that happened here was their doing. Lin Feng listened and then pointed at the box, asking what it was. The soldier explained that it was an anti-demon divine artifact specially forged by their legion's tactician. As he spoke, he opened the box. He told Lin Feng to watch carefully, saying that he would soon understand. However, as he opened the box, the soldier's eyes widened in shock. His face turned pale. He shouted in disbelief, saying it was impossible. The object had clearly been there just a moment ago, yet now it had completely disappeared. Hearing that, Lin Feng walked up to the box, his expression calm as he examined it closely. After observing carefully, he stated that there was no illusion magic involved and the item had truly been taken. But just as he said that, sudden black energy seeped out of the box. Seeing this, Lin Feng's eyes sharpened as he sensed something was wrong. He quickly reacted, telling them to wait, but it was already too late. In the next moment, the bodies of the fallen soldiers began to move unnaturally. Thin black energy entered their bodies. Then a strange green energy erupted from the corpses, spreading rapidly across the battlefield. Seeing this, the soldiers who were still alive stared in horror. One of them shouted in panic, asking what was going on and what had just happened. Suddenly the ground started shaking as debris scattered across the battlefield. A soldier tightened his grip on his sword and stared in confusion. He could not understand what was happening. Before anyone could react further, the sky above changed as massive green energy pillars formed, piercing through the air like sharp spears. The energy gathered into a single point, forming a powerful magic formation of radiant green energy. The next second, green lightning crashed onto the ground, destroying everything. One of the armored soldiers was thrown off balance, crashing forward as the impact overwhelmed him. His body hit the ground hard, unable to withstand the sudden power. The next second, a massive swirl of dark energy twisted violently across the battlefield, tearing through the air like a living storm. Lin Feng was forced back as the overwhelming force pushed against him, his body struggling to stay steady. The pressure grew heavier with every second. Even the undead around him could not endure it. Lin Feng felt the terrifying weight pressing down on everything and realized this was no ordinary power. He wondered what kind of existence could create such an overwhelming force. Nearby, an injured soldier, barely able to stand, gritted his teeth as he recognized the phenomenon. He shouted that he had seen this kind of summoning ritual before on the battlefield. His voice trembled as he revealed the truth. This was Galadiusa, and he was about to descend. Just as he said that, a massive clawed hand began to emerge from the swirling energy portal. The air trembled as Galadiusa slowly took form, his presence alone enough to distort the surroundings. He paused for a moment, observing his incomplete state. He noted that something was missing, questioning whether his power was also incomplete. However, Galadiusa showed no concern. Even in this incomplete form, he calmly declared that it was still more than enough to project his power. Galadiusa fully manifested, his presence turning the battlefield into a place of absolute fear. Lin Feng, who was standing quite far away, sensed his presence the moment he appeared. Galadiusa was fully revealed. He had long white hair flowing in the wind, dark markings across his face, and glowing eyes filled with cold intent. He looked around, checking his surroundings, as he finally entered the human world. But suddenly, Galadiusa's eyes sharpened as he turned around, anger flashing in his gaze. He sensed Lin Feng's presence, the necromancer energy flickering around him. A smile formed on Galadiusa's face as he recognized that it was actually Lin Feng. On the other hand, Lin Feng suddenly paused, his eyes narrowing slightly as he sensed someone approaching. It was Galadiusa. In the next instant, with a violent surge of purple energy, Galadiusa arrived. He appeared right in front of Lin Feng and looked down at him from above, surrounded by flowing black and purple energy. With a calm yet eerie tone, he remarked that it had truly been a long time. Galadiusa's expression twisted into a wide, sinister grin as he spoke again, calling Lin Feng a damn bug. And that's where we wrap up today's video. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you won't miss the next story. If you've enjoyed this one and want to see more, leave your comment down below. Also, don't forget to drop a like to support our channel and subscribe to stay up to date everything that comes out. See you next time. Bye-bye. And a big hug to everyone. I'm out.